Can be seated, including especially Councillor Walker. Then we'll get underway. So we have apologies. Councillor Benson-Pope is not in attendance today, and Councillor Fiso will be leaving early. But otherwise, we're all set to go. So we'll get underway with Mr. Alistair Morrison of the Waikouiti Coast Community Board.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, just a procedural matter. It would be really helpful, perhaps, if because we've got mixed presentations today, if you could say whether it's annual plan or Aurora. Would that be possible?
Well, I shall mention how it appears on my sheet because it's not specific. So those who haven't been tagged with Aurora, I will assume to be annual plan. And Mr. Morrison is here for the annual plan.
Hello, good afternoon. Nice to see you all again, and thank you for the opportunity to pop in for a chat. We recognise that this year's annual plan is a bit of a holding pattern while we wait for next year's 9-year plan. So this year we're not asking for any new expenditure, but we do want to highlight a few things. Regarding Three Waters for the North Coast, we would like reasonably accurate information about when the upgrade to the Waikouiti water treatment plant will be complete and in service. This project has drifted quite a bit since the lead in water days, and we really do need to give the community some up-to-date information. A bit further south, we are seeking information about what is locally known as the Big Pipe water supply from Mount Grand to Waitati, Warrington, Seacliff and Merton. And we want to know how close the current supply is to capacity, because we're wondering what's happening with the increased housing development in our area. And just a recent thing about water. A couple of months ago, while the water restrictions were in place for Waikouiti and Karatani, a lady was walking her dog in Karatani and she came across a significant leak on the side of the road. She phoned the DCC after hours number, only to find that the person on the end of the phone didn't know where Karatani is. She persevered for a while but then gave up. She phoned me and I contacted one of the water department chaps, and he contacted a crew to go and have a look, and the problem was fixed the following morning. This is not the only issue I've come across with the after hours number leaving something to be desired, and perhaps it's something that could be looked at. Regarding wastewater, we note that the Future Development Strategy has acknowledged that there are some serious issues with wastewater disposal in our communities. And our request here is that our board is kept informed about investigations and developments on these topics as they proceed. 6 monthly progress reports shouldn't be too much to ask. In our submission, we've asked you to give financial support to the One Coast Recycling Facility, and I'm aware that Judy Martin was speaking with you last week. From a standing start of nothing a few years ago, this is now a significant entity of which the city can be proud, and we do ask that you will continue to support it financially. We also ask that you will continue to provide the rural skip days, which have grown to be an essential service. We do have an issue related to the upcoming implementation of the new curbside wheelie bin system. In our area, and perhaps in others, there are folk on unsealed rural roads who have traditionally taken their DCC black bags in the boot of the car to a collection point near the highway, but some of whom do not have the physical ability to transport a red wheelie bin in the same manner. And there is a real problem with the new rubbish collection trucks not wanting to go along some roads. We are currently in discussion with the appropriate staff about this, and perhaps this is something that fell through the cracks a bit while the new system was being developed. Regarding cycleways, we ask that you will support the Coastal Communities Cycleway Connection. This is not some nice-to-have tourist attraction. It is infrastructure that is required to provide safe daily travel options for the communities north of Dunedin. The team who are working on this are doing a marvellous job of getting the project up and running by developing the project in various stages. Regarding road maintenance, we're getting complaints about the seemingly reduced level of maintenance of vegetation along some roads. And it's not a good look when we're told by some local ratepayers that when they phone DCC, they're told that the Finance Department has decreed that funding for this important service has had to be reduced. While we recognise that St Clair and St Kilda beaches are a real priority for Council, we do ask that our rather long coastal environment is not forgotten. Climate change and sea level rise are not confined to the city limits. Last year, Andy Barrett and I gave visual presentation to you regarding various issues about Karitani Harbour. We've been given to understand that one of your newer committees has recommended that a management plan should be implemented for this area. But we've heard zero since then. And just finally, while on the topic of zero, we mentioned in our submission that it's taken around 2 years to achieve zero with our request for signage on Coast Road to indicate the location of the Cherubi King Recreation Reserve. And sometimes it can be just a bit frustrating about the time it takes to get nothing done. I will leave it at that and happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions, Councillor? Yes, Councillor O'Malley.
Thanks, Alistair. Geraldine Tate came with a similar presentation around the cycleways and the community's connectiveness. And one of the sections that came up was Waikawati to, Warrington to Evansdale, and potentially widening that corridor, that shoulder at least, so as to make that piece off the side of the road safer. Would that be the kind of thing you're looking for in terms of do one piece at a time? When I speak, you too.
They're raising funds for the design, the detailed design of the clip-on lane on the railway bridge across the river from Waikawiti to Karitani, and they're about $7 or $8 grand short of the $25,000 they want. They've done a very, very good job on that. They're also busy with the section between Waitati and Blueskin Road up by Orokonui Eco Sanctuary, and the local landowner has given his blessing to the whole thing. And we have asked that Council could perhaps do what the Regional Council have done and waive consent fees on that. The bit from Warrington to Evansdale basically follows the footpath, such as it is at the moment, and just widening that, and that's not a particularly big job. And the whole idea was by doing all these bits and pieces, it's easier to apply for major funding when you can demonstrate that you've actually done something yourself about all the other bits and pieces. Well, when it comes to the long-awaited one from Evansdale to Waitati, that would probably end up being similar to what's happening in Wellington at the moment. There is a big rock wall being put in between Petone and Wellington, where they build the rock wall, then they put the platform on top of it, and your cycleway goes on the top. And the Evansdale to Waitati would be something similar. It's not a hugely difficult thing, it just takes a lot of rocks and a fair bit of money. So that will follow on from that.
Yes, that Petone Cycleway is rumoured to take up all the National Cycleway money this year. The water plant in Waikawiti and the capacity of the Leith Saddle water pipe, I believe that's all been looked at under integration systems planning. Do you want an update? I don't know much about what's going on in the ISP either. Would you like an update as to where we are with the ISP?
Yeah, it was middle of last year, a few of us went up to the water treatment plant. We were invited by the Three Waters Department to have a look at what they were doing there. At the time of the lead in water thing, when we had the big public meeting in the events centre, we were talking about, yes, that you'll have all this next year, but then next year became the year after, became 6 months later, and right at the moment we don't know. But we get people asking us, when are we going to get it? Because you will remember from the public meetings, people were rather scathing about the taste of the water. So we just want to be able to tell them what's going to be happening. And the big pipe thing, there has been stuff talked about in the past about Mount Grant to Waikouiti, but you're talking big pipe for that, and you're talking oodles of money a long way away. It's the pipe that goes at the moment, it's only a 6-inch pipe, goes from Mount Grant through to Seacliff and then through a smaller pipe down to the southern part of Merton. And we're just wanting to know when that is going to actually reach its capacity. Because Warrington, for instance, there's 35 new building plots there, and Warrington's population will increase by about 30% when they're all finished. So we want to know how far this can go. So as you grant consents for building this, that and the next thing, are we taking into consideration the fact that the water supply might have a finite lifetime?
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Alistair, for a really well laid out written submission. Thank you. I think it was point 6 of your submission. You talk about transport and a good problem you have of overcrowding on the bus route at a certain time. Firstly, when is that time? And secondly, how are those conversations with the ORC going to resolve the situation?
Next Tuesday at 11 o'clock, I'm talking to the Regional Council about that very thing, and we'll see you there. The problem with the buses, it's been a nice problem. We fought for ages to get a weekend service put in. That did happen, and it's been well utilised. But there is a bit of tweaking needed to be done on the timetable. Big problem that has arisen is the volume of people coming on the early morning bus going into town. That included school children. So we managed to get them to agree to put an extra bus on from Warrington. So that bus picks up Warrington people, Waitati people. Meanwhile, the Palmerston Waikouiti one goes on by. And so you're filling up 2 buses now with what used to be a partial 1 bus. Then we asked, well, can we now have a second bus going into Warrington in the afternoon? Because the 3:30 bus from the hub here tends to get overcrowded as well. And that wasn't happening, and we've asked a number of questions about that, and then it was happening sporadically. But it's not fair on the parents of children who don't know if their kids are going to come back on the bus into Warrington or if they're going to get dropped off in the rain at Evansdale and what's happening. So we've asked all that, and we're going to be asking that again in some detail next week. So we're making progress, but it's been a good problem to have because people have been saying for ages, let's get the cars off the road and let's all jump on buses and things. And so we've done that, and we're pushing for it, and it's only going to grow. And we recognise that our Route 1, as it's called, is an awful lot smaller than Queenstown and Peninsula and whatnot, but it's still very, very important. And if we are going to be pushing to get people on the buses, then we've got to do it right and provide the buses for them.
Very good. Councillor Vandervis.
Regarding the 6-inch pipe capacity, I remember voting against putting a pipe out at all, thinking that it would be more resilient to have independent water treatment at northern locations. But that when they decided to go ahead for it, I said, well, if you're going to dig the trench anyway, why not put an 8 or even a 12-inch pipe in? My question to you is, given that we're stuck with this small capacity pipe, what do you think the appetite might be for the northern villages for people to actually put in large detention tanks so that that pipe can deliver capacity day and night and not suffer the peak load, which is the limiting factor currently?
All that can be a very, very good
Microphone, sorry.
Yeah, that can be a very good idea. One thing we did point out is the fact that when new building consents are granted for lifestyle blocks and the rest of it, they say you will collect your own roof water. And in these days of drying out climate change, when those tanks run down or run dry, they have to be filled up from the council system. So that's going to be utilising water. So if you're over on the Port Chalmers side, the tanker can pick water up from Port Chalmers. If you're on the Waitati side, you're going to be taking water from the 6-inch pipes. So the idea of people having retention tanks, as you call it, is a good idea. What we have at the moment, the water comes from Mount Grand, it comes down Leith Valley Road to a pumping station, it gets pumped up over the top of the Leith Saddle to a large tank on Waitati Valley Road, and it comes down in a sort of U-shape down through Waitati where there are pressure reducing valves, and then it goes through Warrington and up to a reservoir at the top of Seacliff. So you've actually got reservoirs at both ends. Then the next idea was to put a pipe between Seacliff and Karitani so that in the event of earthquakes or whatever, you could actually supply one side from the other. So the southern end could take water from Waikouiri and vice versa. That pipe's only a piddly little 2.5 inch, 3 inch pipe. So yeah, water retention tanks are a very good idea. But again, an expensive addition, and quite where you're going to put them is the other thing.
My question really was, what would be the appetite of homeowners in your area to actually pay for these bigger tanks?
Probably not great. We had all the,
Okay, look, sorry,
we had the Civil War when
Mr.
we were
Morrison.
talking about the big pipe.
can I interrupt there? Probably just the answer will do, because we need a very concise answer at this stage, because
The
you're very
appetite would probably
fulsome.
be less than 50%, I would have thought.
Great. And because by going concise, because your very fulsome answers are eaten into the next
I'm a very
speakers.
fulsome person.
That's right. And so it's very informative. However, it's probably more than we need at this moment. But because I've still got two more questions to address to you, firstly from Councillor Gary, then Councillor Mayhem.
Asked and answered.
If we can be precise. That's one covered. Councillor Mayhem.
I wondered, Alistair, if you'd explored with the buses, because it's Route 1, any bus that goes out has to go all the way to Palmerston and back. What if there was an extension of a Pine Hill bus, that every occasional run, the Pine Hill bus just ran all the way to Waitati? Because that's only 10 minutes and people could carpool from there for those busy, busy morning runs.
All things are possible. I sat with the Regional Council Transport chappie lead and the Ritchie's people about a year ago. We had a meeting looking at all the different possibilities that could happen with these bus overloads, and a lot of it depended on bus availability, driver availability, and of course money as well, and we sort of left it to them. We shouldn't have to design this for them. That's what they get the Film Star wages for. And what you suggest is possibly possible, because Pine Hill one does go for quite a long way up the hill and then to come all the way down. I don't know how that would work with timetables. I doubt it, but it's always something that can be explored.
Well, it would just be 20 kilometres instead of Palmerston and beyond.
Right.
Recognise that.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And submission.
It's almost a yes or no.
But look, no, you've covered the questions. Thank you.
All done?
We're done. Thank
Good.
you.
Well, enjoy the rest of your very busy day.
Thank you.
I watched yesterday with interest.
Yes, next we have Mr. Elliot Weir.
Felt like I was in the hot seat there.
He's also speaking to the annual plan.
Kia ora. Kia ora tātou. I'll try and be quick because I've written probably too much down. Lovely to see you all. I'm not here representing anyone today but myself, but I am here to speak from my perspective as someone who gets around Dunedin by foot and bike and car and bus, and I took the bike in today in case you couldn't tell from the redness in my face, but also my perspective as an Otago Regional Councillor and as the Treasurer of Dunedin Pride Incorporated. So first and foremost, DCC absolutely needs to invest as much as possible in social housing. There's people putting themselves in real danger because we've failed to invest as much as we need in our most vulnerable in the city. So that needs to change. It's been a while since a Connecting Dunedin meeting, so in lieu of that, I want to urge you to continue integrating active and public transport better into our transport network, and as fast as possible, really. The new George Street's a real watershed moment for the city, and I hope it sparks further pedestrianisation around the city, denser, more people-friendly neighbourhoods. However, over the next few weeks and months, I think enforcement, education, monitoring and prevention of the shared space to prevent car domination, I guess, is incredibly critical. Every time I go up and down there, I see cars parked in the pedestrian spaces, so it might be worthwhile to have a parking attendant stationed solely on George Street just for the next few weeks or months until that behaviour sort of settles in, and might be worth working together to lobby central government to increase those parking fine maximums so that they're actually a worthwhile deterrent. How much time I got? All right. All the bike stands around the new George Street are terrific. Means I can go there and go to a shop or have lunch right there. However, for longer trips, or especially at night, or when I need to leave my bike overnight, there's not particularly anywhere around the centre city that is good. So a secure, ideally CCTV covered and sheltered bike parking in the centre city is really something I know a lot of cyclists have been talking about and wanting. I normally have to go up all the way to campus and park in that locky dock there, which is great, but something in the centre city is really needed. As well as all the cycling routes people have talked about, coastal connections, the Tunnels Trail and the Albany Street connection is really going to be critical to connect that State Highway 1 with the Te Aka Okatako. South Dunedin was also a bit of a blind spot there, I think, with our cycleways, and I'd really love for DCC to work with the ORC on improving the functionality of the bus hub. I know there's a lot of issues there. I think the easiest change for now would be to ban through traffic there. It doesn't, no other bus hub in the country has cars driving right through it. It sort of clogs up the buses and delays routes right from the start, and there's not really any point to drive through there. Obviously there's places to go there, the police station and the new building there, but through traffic could be banned, and that countdown entrance could be closed for an estimated 2 more bus stops. They've got 2 other entrances. On other annual plan matters, the Wildlife Hospital I think is also critical. ORC's just chipped in through our Eco Fund, but the Dunedin Wildlife Hospital is such a valuable asset to the city, not just ecologically, but economically through the wildlife tourism that it helps sustain and the education in the Polytech that provides a really, really cool opportunity for those Polytech students. I'm also here to beg for funding for Te Whare o Rukutia on Princess Street. Dunedin Pride gets an immense amount of value from that space. Pride Month would not have been possible this year without it. Through our work with Dunedin Fringe, we use that space for a lot of events, yes, including drag shows, Councillor Vandervis. All councils in the country are needing to raise rates by uncomfortable amounts, but we do need to have the guts in order to do so, to keep Dunedin a city that people want to live in, work in, travel around and thrive in. Kia ora. Thank you for my time.
Thank you. We have some questions. Councillor O'Malley.
Hi, Elliot. My first question is on connecting Dunedin. That is being unilaterally cancelled every time by Waka Kotahi. So we're getting quite close to complaining to them. Would you come and complain with us when we do?
Yeah, can't speak for council, but yeah.
And I'm not sure, because the bus hub is being built or not built before I got on the council, but I thought that was mostly an ORC project, and I thought at the time that it was also a temporary project and that you were going to come back with a new bus hub around about now. So I guess my question would be, where is the ORC with its plans on the bus hub before we start thinking about closing Great King Street at one end?
Definitely a conversation that needs to happen, and I think that's something we want to talk about and have a proper plan for.
Yeah, a really good connecting Dunedin item, wouldn't it? Thanks.
Very good. Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you. Hi, Elliot. Good to see you again. Putting your cyclist helmet on, not the pedestrian or the public transport, but the cyclist one specifically. First of all, you mentioned a secure bike park and that there is an appetite for it. Is there any way you're able to sort of quantify, are we talking 5 bikes, 50 bikes, 500 bikes that might want to be left overnight? Because you can still be done drunk in charge of a cycle, from what I understand.
I think there's a grey area in the law there, but either way, I think there's quite a few just from, Facebook groups and stuff like that. I think that need is in the dozens, if not a couple of hundred. But just anything would be great. Yeah. So
perhaps a small area somewhere around the Octagon, just to kind of test the theory or the idea.
I think that'd be a great start. Yeah.
Still with your cyclist helmet on, I'm curious to know, you haven't mentioned it, and I don't know whether it's that you don't want to weigh in on it, which is fine, but as a keen cyclist, I'm curious to know your opinion on Dunedin Rail in terms of the options that have been put forward, rip up, etc., etc. Are you happy to weigh in?
Yeah, it's not. It's, I think it's a worthy debate to be had, and I'm glad it is one that is being had. That we're talking about rail versus cycle rather than roads versus either of those things. I'm not sure. I haven't haven't been on that rail myself. I don't think it's a commuter sort of rail, but I think it is still a valuable asset. Whether that's more valuable of an asset than a potential cycle trail, I'm not sure. But I do think, as a city council and I guess regional council as well, I think we've been pretty good with regional cycle routes, and I think that it would be worthy to keep connecting those up, but that ultimately we also need to focus on those cycle routes in the city that might require some reprioritisation of space.
Fence very carefully set on. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Gilbert, for reminding me as a cyclist why I gave up alcohol. A bunch of questions, some have been asked, so I've got two left. In your written submission, Elliot, and just verbally you talked about the George Street shared zone. It's something I've had lots of feedback during the past week, actually, and so I'll feed back the responses I get from staff to my questions. My question to you, though, is what are the potential issues accruing down the line if we don't get on top of this before it becomes a problem?
I think at the moment there's a fair amount of people, just driving down to kind of check it out or whatever, and that's understandable. But behaviours very easily become embedded right from the start. So this is sort of a critical point to make sure people know that shared space doesn't mean the cars can go everywhere, and that is a space where pedestrians are prioritised, and it's not necessarily a space that you want to be driving through, and that's not the main purpose. And so people will change their behaviour because it's a new space and adapt where they go to park and where they move in and how they get into the city based on that. So this, I think, is a critical period before that behaviour gets embedded.
Thank you. And following on from Councillor Gilbert's questions around the bike hub, again, something I've pressed our staff around. Two questions around this. Firstly, why do you think it's critical that a bike hub is centrally located? And secondly, do you think it's in some ways a missing link at the moment that we've done so well in encouraging the numbers we now see on the pathways and the roads cycling, that this is some way a important missing link?
I mean, I think the reason it's critical that it is in the centre city is that that's where people are going. And there is that sort of one on campus, which I think is really helpful. It's not, complete picture, but it's part of that puzzle. And the centre city is where people are going to be leaving stuff overnight if they're going to, bars or something like that. It's where people are going for work and might need to leave it all day, and their work might not have a bike parking and stuff. There's more room elsewhere in the city. This is where it's critical, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Vandervis.
Councillor Ware, you said you want to prevent car domination, increase car parking fines, and ban through traffic at the bus hub access to Countdown. If you want to do all of these things in the face of most of our residents wishing to choose car transportation, how will that improve things for most people?
I think I take issue with your word choice there, because while most people in the city do use cars at the moment, it's because it is so easy to park wherever and leave it just as an expense and take the parking fine. It is much less safe to, bike into work, to take the bus, and that's something the regional council's working on the bus side. And so improving those choices will provide that choice. It's not taking away the choice of riding a car. And I think there's a lot of people in the community that if those options were a lot better, they'd consider them a lot more. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Elliot. Just a very quick question around the bike secure parking again, and thank you for raising it. Lest we should think that just a good lock is all that's needed. I became aware of this, my daughter's bike was locked and stolen. Could you comment on the value of many of the bikes and why that secure storage is so very important in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, even if you've got a cheap bike, it's a pain for it to be stolen, and it doesn't normally get followed up in the way that your car getting stolen would. But a lot of people who are sort of switching to that as their main mode of transportation and shifting away from a car will invest quite, obviously less than a car, but those can be thousands, and at the higher end, I guess tens of thousands of dollars if you're getting, an e-bike, which a lot of people are moving to, and it's providing an affordable, compared to car purchase and maintenance, but really accessible mode of transportation for people. But if they're worried it's going to be stolen in the centre city, then that's a risky investment.
Thank you.
Okay. And thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Weir. Thank you. And next we have John Moyle from Sunnyvale Community Centre, who's talking to the annual plan.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm John Moyle and I'm representing the Sunnyvale Community Board. I'm also on the Saddle Hill Community Board too. My submission that you would have read was very brief, so I will elaborate on that today. I'll give you a brief history of Sunnyvale Community Centre, let you know about our current partnership and why I'm here today. The Green Island Borough Council opened the Sunnyvale complex in 1977. It was well thought out and well ahead of its time. One of the first multi-use, all year round facilities today would be called a sportsville or a sports hub. It has been the home of football, cricket, squash, hockey, athletics, boot camps, personal trainers, cross-country, gymnastics, birthdays, weddings, civil defence and countless other community events. It was completed to a stage 2 level. The Green Island Borough Council then amalgamated with the DCC in 1989. So the stage 3 part of it never took place. In 2008, I presented this document to the DCC and I asked for $100,000 to kickstart stage 3. This didn't happen, but the DCC in its wisdom came with a suggestion of a service level agreement, $42,000 per year plus GST. So this was put in place. We then went on to raise approximately $1.2 million and we completed the new club facilities, toilets and restaurant known as the Village Green. The current agreement is due to run out in 2024. Many of you would have visited the Village Green, the lounge and the new club rooms. So what is new is great, works well and functions, but what is original is coming near the end of life. Toilets, plumbing, showers, etc. The most significant issue we are facing is the cladding. 3 sides of the building are in a product called EPS panelling. It's like sandwich panelling, 2 bits of steel with polystyrene in the middle. It's old and it's now deemed a risk that it will melt in a fire, so the fire service will leave it. It is non-structural, but the problem with this, which has come about, our insurance has gone from approximately $28,000 to $64,000 in 5 years. This will not be sustainable. We are currently investigating any types of alternatives, insurance, non-insurance, different compliance. But But that is a real problem, and that's really why I'm here. We want to continue the partnership with the DCC. We want to put in place a new long-term service agreement. Then we want to raise money to replace or potentially extend the building, potentially offering some much-needed more hard court services, which are generally lacking in Dunedin. We have been in discussion with Parks and Recreation, and we are waiting the outcome of the sports facilities review. The current numbers of... So outside of my marriage, Sunnyvale has been the biggest commitment in my life. And one person may argue it's a bigger commitment, but the numbers being used, Sunnyvale, are growing. Junior Football Club, 440 kids. Senior Football Club has almost doubled in the last 12 years. It's a multi-use all year round, and it has the group of men and women who went forward with the stage 3. We were led a bit blind, but we've since been used nationally as an example of what can be achieved. And some legislation, especially the alcohol reform legislation, has been in our favour by leasing out and taking that responsibility off clubs and societies. But as I say, the building does need a partnership, and having the backing of such a substantial entity as the DCC allowed us to go out to big funders like Lotto, Community Trust, and get this built. And we're now in a position with this insurance especially, if the building was brand new, it would fund itself, which is quite a unique position. And a lot of the things we've done have come good and been quite unique. But it is a great example for what a sports club or facility can be, and multi-use. You know, even though it's 50 years old, the size of its changing rooms, the use of the grounds, and what we've done, they still hold their own. They are still bigger than many other sports buildings, and they don't sit idle, which is a big deal. I visited Cornwall Cricket Club 25 years ago and was in awe of what they had. They now come to us and in awe of what we have. But we need a partnership to sustain this and keep it going. Otherwise, we will be in potentially real trouble. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you. Hi, John. Couple of questions for you. First of all, you're talking about partnership. You've also mentioned service level agreement and things like that. You've also mentioned, there'll be funding required to change the cladding. Can you clear up a little bit what you mean in terms of the partnership and SLAs and that sort of stuff? Don't forget to press that.
Yep. Okay, so the agreement that was initiated by the DCC allowed us to have funding for multiple years rather than a lump sum, and that was used to allow us to get a loan and then to have the basis of funding for the bigger picture. So we go out to lotteries knowing that we had the backing of an entity, and it was a shared project. And we got money off Community Trust, lotteries, raised 100k locally, and so that all went towards the building we've got now. So the money, I suppose, it's been earmarked and is happening, but we want a continuation of that agreement. How that agreement is set or arranged, we don't know, because I know some of the regulatory requirements of the DCC have changed since that agreement was put in place.
But get round a table and have a chat, basically.
Yes, exactly. That's what we want, is the discussion to start. Yes.
And the other question I've got for you is around the cladding, specifically the insurance that you were talking about it going up drastically. As somebody else who has very similar cladding has in much of one of my bakeries, are you aware that many insurance companies now will not insure anybody that has any of that in their building?
Yes, so we have argued this, and it's gone up substantially for the last few years, and of course because we're now paying it off, we are penalised even further. Modern like-for-like replacement is upwards of 700,000, but we sort of feel if we're going to do that, and we need to look at the bigger picture and potentially look, can we provide some hard court services? I know that they're in dire need with the growth of volleyball, basketball. We've spoken about getting more members there, more people using the facility. So it's to know that we've got the support financially from the DCC to go forward and then progress various alternatives rather than just simply like for like and then have a building which is compliant and reduces our costs but may not really serve the future.
Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Synchronicity at play. Councillor Gilbert's asked my 2 questions.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you. I just want to follow up from Councillor Gilbert's. So you have football and cricket and squash there at the moment, and so I'll go to the last part. So if you're talking about hardcourt, you're talking about then provision for basketball primarily, adding that in?
Well, the sports that are really short of space are basketball and volleyball and 3-on-3 basketball. We have, when we initially went through this exercise, we spoke to gym sports. On that occasion, a decade ago, they weren't talking to each other. They are now in a better place, and they're still looking for facilities. We've spoken to beach volleyball. They wanted somewhere in the summer. So we want, like most buildings at the moment, during the day they are relatively sparsely used. But we are looking at all avenues because, in addition to the gymnasium space, would offer, basketball and volleyball, the 2 that come to mind. But we have the facility to feed people. We have 24 showers. We have 22 toilets. So a lot of that's already there. So that's why we're thinking, the gymnasium, do we replace like for like and that's it? Or do we look where we're right in the middle of lots of growing suburbs and, would we be looking to assist the shortage of what there already is in Dunedin. But the final report I don't believe is out yet about the facilities review. So we are waiting for that.
Thank you. And in terms of the service level agreement, so you're asking for a continuation of what you've got? Because there are a lot of other, obviously, clubs around the city.
Yes, well, the service level wouldn't continue in its current form. It was a document that will finish this year, so it will have to be a new level agreement. I would like to see the finance go backwards, and I understand that there are every sporting body would look to these things, but what we have is 50 years of multi-use all year round, not sitting empty, idle, rotting away with small. We are growing our numbers, and we are the envy of most sporting bodies in Dunedin. I have suggested to many sporting bodies to merge and share facilities, and they don't think it's a good idea. It is the best idea. And even having a commercial tenant, which was completely new, and we didn't know if we'd get it, but we now provide a place for our locals to come 6 days a week, not 2 hours on a Saturday. We've got a fully commercial kitchen. We take away all the liquor responsibility, all the health and safety responsibilities from volunteers. So all these things, even the price of liquor, we're not selling $2 points, we're not encouraging that stuff. We are under the realms of commercial people. So all those things that have changed over the last period, we are well ahead of the game. And organising sports venues and events because of the requirements of a commercial tenant. But we still have a great place to watch sport.
Great, thank you. Councillor Barker.
This is a budget meeting, so I'm just looking at the service level agreement. Is it with the Green Island Combined Sports Bodies? Is that what it was with? And I see in the budget that previously in other years you've got $42,000, but there's nothing in the budget for 24-25. Are you asking for $42,000 to be put in our budget for this next year?
I'm asking for the discussion to start. Our last payment will be due this year. And I understand it won't happen overnight, but we need to get the ball rolling and discuss. The amount, again, I'm not here for a handout. I want to keep the partnership going and the discussions going, so that's why I'm here.
This is the process for discussion, I think, and the process where the council would put money in
Okay, yes, I would like it. That'd be excellent, thanks. Is that a handshake? No? Okay.
Thank you. And Councillor Hurland.
Thank you. You're quite funny. I just, so as far as revenue from that site,
Microphone.
you obviously get,
Microphone.
It went off. As far as revenue from, no, when you touch it, it turns mine off. Yeah. As far as revenue from that site, you obviously get commercial rent from the restaurant. Or do you create, is there revenue from anyone else? Like, do they pay membership to be part of the hub, or is there anything like that?
Yeah, so we get the commercial revenue, and all the clubs pay a rent for the building as well. And we do have, we've had Ideal Services, we currently have a personal trainer doing sessions in there. So we're generating income from other sources as well, but just and as I say, if it was a new facility, that funding would maintain and build up a maintenance fund. But because of the age of the building, we are well behind the 8 ball, yes.
And so is there a mortgage on that building at the moment?
No, it is currently owned by the combined sports body, and again, it's a unique scenario. We own a building with a good value, but the value will never be come to fruition because it's on council land. So, and that also, you sit in different areas about funding and how you find money and who you can go to. An example was the FIFA money that came for the Football World Cup. We weren't entitled to any because we weren't a council building, even though we probably have more football played at Sunnyvale than anywhere else in Dunedin. So, yeah, there's some unique, and nothing's off the table in the future of the building, but we want to work together. We don't want to be in a position where we're throwing the keys at you and saying we don't know what else to do.
Right. There we go. We've covered it. Thank you, Mr. Moyle. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Next we have Hilary Calvert speaking about Aurora.
My apologies for just sending this through to you rather than the very short one that you got earlier, which just really said I wanted to speak. But I'm sure you have learnt to read very fast, and I won't read it out to you again, as I've been asked not to in any case. As it says at the top, however, some points for you to ponder. And I wanted to just focus on 3 things that I think are particularly important. The first is that DCHL is strongly recommending the sale. Now, what that amounts to in a normal course of events is the turkeys organising Christmas, and we wouldn't usually suggest that the turkeys organise Christmas. In this case, if DCHL is thinking it should be sold and it's not in their personal interests, then it's a very good suggestion that you should be looking at doing what they want. It is not in their personal interests. It's in their personal interest to keep any of the assets in DCHL going and to have them under their control and to be directors of a bigger company and a bigger thing. So for them to suggest to you that it should be sold is a significant thing for them to do. When the turkeys organise Christmas, you can think that Christmas ought to be a good thing. The second thing I'd like to focus on for a wee moment is that the people of Dunedin, and it isn't as some people might have suggested the city of Dunedin, it's the people of Dunedin who you promised when you all became councillors to work in to the benefit of the people of Dunedin. They will retain an investment in any event. The proposal is for that investment to move from being a company to being a set of individual bits of investments in a variety of different ways, a diversified fund. So it's not like you're selling the family silver and the family silver's gone. This is changing the investment that the people of Dunedin have in one asset and changing it to being in a different asset. And that asset that is the alternative is got all sorts of advantages. In my view, it's diversified, it's easier for you round this table to understand. It's something that, I'm not saying that you're not very clever people, but that understanding an investment portfolio is much easier than understanding the ownership of a company that is controlled in the way it is, with the commission deciding how much it can charge and those sorts of things. So it would be more under your control, if control is a thing that's important to you. If it was a fund, the Aurora fund, than it is currently. You can't control it currently at all. And if you did try, you shouldn't be trying. It's a commercially run company and it should stay like that. So the suggestion that somehow owning it gives you some control, although ownership usually does, in this sort of situation it doesn't. And the third thing that I think is particularly important is that historically the DCC, through its holding company, didn't make a good job of running Aurora. And two things happened. One is that it made a crappy job of doing it. And two, it was an embarrassment. The people of Dunedin tended to wander up through Central and have people complaining about how much it was costing and how often power poles fell over and how many outages were happening and whatever it is. So if you knew that you, as a councillor, was the controller in some fashion of Aurora, you would have just been wandering around being embarrassed for some years. It was not being dealt with in a good way. So now, moving forward, we've got DCHL who may be in a better position to run the likes of Aurora than previous iterations of itself. And the current DCHL people don't think it's a good idea that they run it. So we've had, in the past it was run poorly and people asked for money from it that they shouldn't have been asking for and got it when they shouldn't have been getting it. And now, when you might be able to run it all right, and you've had people submitting to you suggesting that it's a wonderful company and if it's well run it could do anything, the people who would be doing that say don't. They say sell it. So it's clear that it's not like, to me, that it's not likely to change. Although it's better now than it has been, it's equally likely that it could turn out you get a new lot of DCHL people and the whole thing's run like a dog's breakfast as it has in the past. So, good idea to sell it, and good of you to think of asking DCHL, smart of them to suggest that it's sold and transferred to being a different investment. Not that it disappears, it just changes the investment to a more responsive one.
Thank you. Councillor Vandevers.
Thank you very much for your very concise and clear understanding. You have said in your submission that you approve of the option 1 sale, but that you're not necessarily approving of the diversity fund part of the question. Is there a preferred type of diverse fund that you have in mind that we should be aiming at, either a low risk, a Waipori low return one, or a higher risk as anticipated one where we're looking for something like what New Plymouth has done with their average 7.3% return since 2004. Are you talking about, or do you have really an opinion on what kind of diversity fund we should go for and how we should ring fence it?
I have thought about it since I put that very brief submission in, and I think it's probably best left to the people like who are running Waipori Fund now, Dunedin Treasury. I have had a talk to them, and I'm comforted to think that it's probably, if it's run similarly to Waipori, although I gather there might be some tweaks and it might have a different risk profile or something, but that is something that you can assume the councillors might want to get a little bit involved in the SIPO or whatever it is that actually controls the fund. So I think that would show that the councillors actually do have something, if they want to have something, that they do have a modicum of control or input into, and you can have the discussion about how the family silver that's turned into the Aurora Fund is actually used and operated.
And do you see any value in setting up perhaps a trust to more effectively ring fence this larger investment? Or do you think that a policy-based idea that we have in Waipori, where we basically have a policy to maintain value, do you think that would be sufficient going forward?
I think if it was me, but I'm not, it's not me, I would do it on a policy base. I don't think you want to separate it out in a more complicated fashion and to have trustees or something else. That's back with the turkeys reorganising things again. I think that it's better for the councillors to have the final ability to involve themselves in the arrangement, and the arrangement of Waipori seems to work reasonably well. Nobody said boo to it for how many years has it been there? Much, and if people want to have some say in it, they can leap in there and feel useful as councillors.
Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you, and thank you for your submission. I've just got a couple of questions. You said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that just as we are getting to the point where it might be at a point of running well, that the people who would be charged with doing that, say, sell it. Could that not mean that we simply need other people running it?
No. And the reason I say no is that it might be being run well now. It's obviously, it's clearly not so embarrassing as it has been in the past, and DCHL seems to be running well now, but I can't imagine that people around this table would be able to choose better people to run it in any way than the people who are through DCHL. I mean, that would be sort of silly talk, wouldn't it? However experienced you guys are, you've chosen the DCHL people because they're business people who know how to run this sort of business in the middle of the year. I can't see how you wouldn't take their advice about that sort of thing.
So you've also said that we're elected to represent the interests of the people of Dunedin. We're also, as we have been reminded over the last few days, elected to be their representatives. So given that roughly 90% of the submissions, give or take, are pro-retain, are we meant to, I was trying to figure out how your Christmas analogy worked and I couldn't figure out turkeys and hams and lambs and stuff, so should we be ignoring the 90%? And does that then mean that we're sitting around the table assuming that we know better than 90% of the people.
No, but what a representative democracy involves is you get up at the beginning of a term or something and you say, this is what I'm like and this is the sort of way I would vote and this is what I think and this is how I think Dunedin should run. And then people choose you, or they don't, as the case may be. Having chosen you, you represent us, ratepayers. So you don't have to come back each time you want to do something to ask me, because you now represent me. And sometimes you'll get it right in my view, sometimes you'll get it wrong, but you represent me. We're having a process like this because it's a major thing that you have to have a process like this about. But to ask, and we need to ask people what they think, but they haven't got, with the best will in the world in that document that we've all seen, people in Dunedin don't necessarily know everything there is to know about anything. They don't suddenly become experts on running a complex business like Aurora just because you give them a vote about something. It's not like voting about what sort of ice cream you have on the table or something. It's and that was why my point is that the people who are concerned about selling it, a lot of them I think are probably concerned about selling the family silver. And I'm saying, don't worry about that because you're keeping it. You're just turning it into a different investment.
Thank you. Councillor O'Malley?
I'm just asking you the question then, why are we bothering with a special consultative process if we're not to pay attention to what we're told by the people of the city? And I guess, are you suggesting that 75% of the people, not one of them understands what they're looking at?
No, I'm not suggesting that. But your job is to weigh up what you have in front of us. Your job is to use, on the whole, sort of best evidence you can find when there's experts on the subject. You don't always choose what people want. We asked about people with parking. We asked about people on George Street. You ask a variety of things and you don't necessarily listen to them because you decide that you know better than them about a variety of things, or that you are more experienced or more knowledgeable, or you have better advice about some things. And so you can screw the scrum so 90% of the people say something or another. You can say, ask the right questions, such as that 90% of the people want to be able to ride their cars down George Street in the opposite direction. That doesn't mean you're going to do that because you think it's good for the people of Dunedin that you don't do that.
So we take, I just want what you're suggesting. That's right. No, that is confusing. I just want to clarify. You are actually saying, though, aren't you, that we're to take the advice of 5 people because they're experts? Are you not?
I think so. Do you want to? Would you take the advice about the people of Dunedin about how you build a hospital in Dunedin? You would take the advice about whether they want a hospital in Dunedin. You might take the advice about whether they want it in the middle of Dunedin rather than up at Waikarri. But you wouldn't take their advice about how to go about producing the result.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that covers it for questions. Thank you. And next we have Mr. Thomas Munn, who's here to talk about Aurora.
I'd just like to say saying kia ora and thank you for having me and allowing me to speak. And apologies for the short, I've had to rush from the study. So thank you.
That's fine. And if you just press the button for the microphone so people at home can hear.
Yeah. Once again, thank you for having me. I made a submission and it is relatively brief also. So for option 2, for the alternative option of keeping Aurora Energy. So as far as the people of Dunedin, and it's good to hear the councillor speaking about representatives of the people of Dunedin. I've lived in Australia, quite a few places, in different places in Australia and New Zealand, and I've seen publicly owned assets be sold to privately owned entities. And what seems to happen quite often, and I guess Otago with its location, as Otago is quite one of the more sparsely populated areas or regions of New Zealand. And what can quite often get lost is when things are sold on to larger entities, they can lose perspective of the local areas. So currently with Aurora being council owned and with having some obligation to the council about their interests, what can happen is if it possibly sold on, then the Otago region may be looked more of a population area, so the smaller towns and smaller areas may miss out more, so it may be viewed purely on population. So, and regardless of whether it is sold on or not, the assets are still going to be under-maintained. So whoever purchases this is still going to be spending a large amount of money on getting things up to scratch. And they are also, like the council is going to have to do, increasing rates is needed for it to be maintained. And whereas a private company is going to do, or if it's sold, is going to do exactly the same thing. However, the bands in which it's tied to will be with the private company. It'll be going from a councillor model, or the stakeholders in Aurora now are the people of Dunedin, councillors, the representatives. However, when it is sold publicly, it'll probably move to more a shareholder model, whereas we're looking at making profits and not so much taking the interest of the people. And I've actually have a long history as work in the disability sector, and one of the unique things about Dunedin as well is we have a large amount of DCC housing units. So I work with a lot of people who are poorer, disabilities, on what you'd call on the fringes of society. And I understand rates are going up for a lot of people in Dunedin, and people are struggling. But what I really like about Dunedin as well is rents for people in DCC flats are kept relatively low and not tied to rates. So I think probably there's a lot of people out there who do not have a voice, who are struggling in society. But what the fantastic thing about Dunedin is a large amount of DCC council-owned flats. And because the DCC is currently managing Aurora, the increases for rates are largely maintained. And I've spoken to people from other parts of New Zealand, like the Dunedin area is lucky to have such large amount of DCC flats. And because they're council owned, it generally means that these people are not getting the large increases that are passed on to the ratepayers. I'm not saying that the rates increasing is affecting, but as far as people living in community housing, DCC housing, it's really admirable, and I believe if it goes sold on, that would also be lost. The council will be maintaining all the facilities, however, the people's voices would be lost, because a lot of people I'm working with are $10 to $15 a week, or any small increase makes a huge difference to them. And it's once again, if you look at it, the Otago region, Dunedin, sure, large population centre. For the area that Aurora covers, actually outside of Dunedin, Queenstown, you've got small communities who are equally as important, but if this asset is sold on, it's quite possible that these smaller communities may not be taken into account. And also, you lose that rural perspective. I'm sure a lot of people working for Aurora now probably have a good knowledge of the terrain. Sure, people were acknowledging that it hasn't been particularly well run in the past, but it seems to be on the right track. But regardless of whether the costs are passed on to ratepayers or if it's sold on, the costs are effectively going to come back on us. Because even if the rates don't go up, if privatisation means that the power prices are going up, which effectively means you're paying for the rates anyway, or the increases. So although I acknowledge that the council is heavily in debt and there is a temptation probably to sell this asset, but for the people of Dunedin in general, and probably for the council, it may be quite a bit of pain coming in the future. However, for the local people of Dunedin, I think there's a lot of people out there who are benefiting from having representatives on the council, having Aurora, looking after Aurora, but in the future that might not be the case. So, thank you.
Very good. Questions? Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in today with your busy schedule. Our last speaker suggested that we should listen to the DCHL directors who are suggesting to sell Aurora, and not the majority of the public that have come in asking us to keep it. Do you think that's a good democracy? Are you happy with that?
I think it's
Microphone.
I'm so sorry about this. I think that's definitely valid. I think as probably DCHL, it's probably very difficult to run, and under the conditions it's probably very difficult. But then I think that people also need to be listened to, because effectively we are the people of Dunedin are paying for it. And I'm sure Aurora is very difficult to maintain, and there's challenging times ahead, so I can understand why the DCHL would be looking at selling. But I think, yeah, the people of Dunedin, I've just read the booklet, so I don't have an in-depth knowledge of power generation or maintenance, but yeah, the people of Dunedin, they're feeling the pinch. Yeah.
After reading that booklet, what was your impression of Aurora? Did you think it sounded like it was a terrible investment or an excellent investment, or what was your impression of that after reading it?
So I believe for the next couple of years there's going to be the daily user charges, which is effectively paying, they're capped, but I believe that might be coming off in 2026, so the costs are going to drastically increase. But from what I can read in the booklet, obviously there's past, things have been addressed in the past and playing catch up as far as, once again, Queenstown, Central Otago is a massively increasing population as well. So there's a lot of investment that has to go in there. But I think from reading the booklets, there's a lot that needs improving, but also I can see a lot of benefit, probably short term, a lot of pain, long term, decades, probably in a couple of decades, start seeing, and once again, it'll still be within DCC control.
Thank you, Councillor Vandervis.
Thank you, Mr. Munn. You've said that a lot of investment has to go into Central Otago. What would you say regarding the ownership by the council of simply not being able to provide the level of level of investment that is required, especially for Central Otago, but that a private owner, a well cashed up private owner, would have that potential, and therefore there could be a win-win all round with a private owner?
Cool, thank you. Central Otago, I guess with Queenstown, the Queenstown, Cromwell, Alexandra and Wanaka area, I guess there's quite a bit of money there as well. A lot of people living in those areas are kind of quite higher income. So I think that'd be possibly, if privatisation was to happen, it would probably be less impactful, but I'm not really sure of how it would be funded. Through rates, obviously, but through Central Otago, where there's more money for fewer people, I'm not entirely sure, sorry.
And you've said that under privatisation, power prices will go up. You've also recognised, though, that power prices are going up regardless. What is it about the Aurora ownership that you think gives us any real control, given that the prices are set by the regulatory authority of the Commerce Commission anyway? What control do you think we have that we would be losing?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I understand the Commission has capped prices for especially daily fixed user charges, but I believe that lapses in 2026. I've read that somewhere, I might be incorrect, but the future, that's for the next 2 years, I believe they're capped. But I guess, as well as Aurora being sold, if it's privatised, they'll be lobbying probably for increases to caps. So a lot of power networks around New Zealand are privatised, and I understand they have a lobby. And if Aurora is also sold, it'll give them more of a voice to call for increases. So I think Aurora, being a council-owned investment, they have more of a publicly owned interest, has more of a voice in keeping those costs low and also having enough money for maintenance.
Thank you. And finally, we have a situation where there is a massive public investment in our council companies, and Aurora is by far the biggest of them. There has been the suggestion from a number of submitters that Aurora should simply be a public good and not be here to provide profits to offset rates. What's your view? Do you think that Aurora should be, given the massive public investment, giving us a return? Or are you quite happy for us to forgo a return from Aurora simply to keep control over it, whatever control might mean under the circumstances?
Cool, thank you. On that point, I'd probably consider that Aurora for the public good would be ideal, but also for Aurora needing to return a profit to the Dunedin City Council also ensures that they're held accountable. So needing to return a profit to the council means that they've got accountability to you guys, whereas for a public good, that's where things can get a bit murky. So it still ensures that it's well maintained, even if it's a council company.
So just to clarify, you think that Aurora should provide a commercial return to the ratepayers, given the massive investment that we have in it?
Yes, when possible. Yes, definitely, yes.
And the fact that it's not been able to do that for many, many years now is not a concern.
Oh, it's definitely a concern. However, I think, I didn't want to get too far into history, but I think historically the reason it hasn't returned an investment is because the dividends have been diverted to other parts, like the stadium, for example, and also I think when it was revealed with the power poles, like a lot of investment had to happen very quickly. So I think profits have been diverted, and I think now it's going to take some time for them to return to an investment. But yeah, I think it's history. We're catching up with history at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor O'Malley.
I think we've traversed it quite heavily and we're getting quite late, so thank you very
Councillor
much.
Walker.
Yeah, well, I will ask briefly. Thanks, Thomas, and thank you for coming in. And you work in the disability sector, I believe. So my question's around perhaps those group of people that are quite vulnerable in that sector in terms of price shifts. There's been a lot of suggestions over the last 2 days that the Commerce Commission is the bulwark against any price rises. So my question is, what confidence do you have, particularly, I guess, under the current government, that current regulatory environment won't change? Microphone.
Yeah, I guess I don't really want to put my own, I've got political beliefs, but I don't want to have them influence my decision too much. I'm trying to look at, yeah, but definitely there's concerns with the current government, but I think it's good, yeah, the people with disabilities are getting more of a voice in society, so I do have confidence that things will go well, but it's, yeah, as far as what the future holds, uncertain, but I have confidence that in the next 2 to 3 years things will be things will be well managed. But as far as the future goes, it's politically, I'm unsure. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mum.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you for attending. Next we have Mr. Tim Hyland.
Is this on? Yep.
Tom,
okay.
Is it?
Yes, I think so. Thanks everyone for your time. I've got a longish submission, but I won't read all of it. I'll just go sort of briefly over the key points and then we can chat about it. So I don't support the sale for the following reasons. The first one is really the issue of democracy, that this was not something I don't remember coming up in the council elections as an issue. So really this sort of thing is a big decision, should really be sort of referendum or something, is my belief. Secondly, the issue of dividends. It's often said, well, it doesn't return dividends to the council since 2017, and so we should sell it. I would argue that it's both part of the same public estate. They're both, why should Aurora pay dividends to the council? They have the same owner, the ratepayer. Why should Aurora pay dividends at all anyway? So it's a monopoly infrastructure utility. We don't require the road investment in roads, that we build roads. They don't have to make a profit that they send back, the public library, etc. It's just it should be a not-for-profit service, not a business, as it used to be, to support other activity. And the dividends creates a bad incentive, actually, for less investment for the sake of short-term returns. And it's number three, it's not. We shouldn't treat it just as any other business. It's not making money, therefore let's sell it. It's actually an essential service, like roads, sewage, water. So it's a strategic asset. It should be in democratic control. Number four, if you sold it, the council would trade a concrete asset for speculative funds, which, yes, it's diversified, but it's still a gamble on the future. And the power lines, and that's a concrete asset. This is a sort of a theoretical, in a way, asset. It can be lost, and we're sort of heading into a world of increasing insecurity globally, climate instability, financial crisis risk, etc., etc. So we should keep real things that we actually have. There's number 5 is I have no of who might be the new owner if it was sold. So there's no vote on the sale, no public vote on the sale, but there's no, not that I know of, any sort of sense of that the public would have a say on who would then buy it, whether it was a local, international, corporate, whatever. Number 6, so if it doesn't make that much profits, and according to the booklet, it's going to need a huge amount of investment to keep it up to scratch, and then just to maintain it as costs get higher and higher. So we have to consider the interests of a private buyer. So there's risks associated with that. So there's risks of it being undersold, like underpriced and sold cheaply, which has happened in the past with public assets. There's a hazard of asset stripping, minimum investment by a new private owner. They will always want to prioritise money for if it's a shareholder business, they'll want to prioritise that rather than short-term returns, annual returns, rather than long-term interest. So there's a risk that companies a bit slowly run into the ground, and we've seen that happen in places like the UK, and the same with New Zealand Rail. It happened here. Number 7, in the booklet it said, well, if it was sold, it would be okay because it's regulated. It would be under the Electricity Authority Commerce Commission, but that's only as good as the quality of the regulator, and that's only as good as that's determined by central government. Those rules can be changed, they can be diluted, and time again. So there's no guarantee there that, say, prices will be capped. That again, not political, but the government might decide, well, we want to reduce red tape on these private companies and let them do what they like. So then you end up in a situation of rent seeking, and also there's a risk of regulatory capture where regulators sort of end up being revolving doors from them to the business, which is what has happened massively again in the UK and in many cases. The work of Jeff Bertram at Victoria is very good on this. Number 8, electricity distribution is a monopoly. So there's one set of lines. There's no competition. There's no choice about which private company we can have our electricity distributed from. So it should be publicly owned. Number 9, the issue of debt. So council, it said you could lower rates in debt through the sale because it wouldn't need to fund the ongoing renewal, but that fundamental need for investment doesn't disappear, and that would still be needing. And a new private owner would just generously pay for all that out of their own back at the cost to their shareholders. Unlikely, I suspect customers would, and all electricity users are also ratepayers. So a sale is just shifting the costs into your power bill off your, it still has to be done. It has to be maintained. Number 10, private owners will want Aurora to return a profit to them over and above its operating costs. So I cannot stress this enough. A business under private ownership will always mean higher prices for customers than an efficiently managed public utility run at cost. And number 11, final one, if it becomes privately owned and dividends are paid, unless the new buyer is wholly local, then that money, those profits will flow out of Dunedin or out of the region, even if it's bought up by a different council, say. That will be then a fund for them, for their stuff. So I think it's a matter of priorities. If times are getting tough, we need to focus on essential things. You wouldn't sell the roads, you wouldn't sell the sewage, you wouldn't sell the water. So this is a strategic asset, natural monopoly, keep it in public hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor O'Malley.
Thanks for your presentation. We actually almost did sell the water by accident. Your central theme really is that this is an essential strategic asset, and it's not just a basic monetary investment, but it has another role to play, which is the distribution of electricity and effectively trying to distribute it as efficiently and as effectively as you can so that the householder costs are as low as we can achieve.
Yeah.
Therefore, by not taking that into consideration, we're not really considering the asset correctly, because if we're looking at it just in monetary terms alone and not playing that role, then we're not doing a fulsome analysis.
Yeah, I think it's a question of how you frame it. Like, do you frame this as just a business, or is it, so if you consider, again, like the library or the roads or the water, it's if you look at it from a business lens, then you think, well, maybe we should. But if you look at it from a public good monopoly service, and I think the word service is important. Like, it should be a service. It's a service. It's not a business. So yeah.
I'll just touch on a theme that's been coming up, which is not central to our theme, because it's not about do we sell or not, but basically do we achieve revenue from it. Of course, Aurora's a little, in terms of that discussion, Aurora's got two footprints, one Dunedin City and then the other one Central Otago, who are not our ratepayers. But if, just on the Dunedin City part alone, you more or less said it, basically it's robbing Peter to pay Paul if you start extracting profit from the ratepayer household in order to offset their rates.
Yeah, it's sort of a circular flow within the same. It seems to make no sense. I'm not sure why it was ever turned into a business in the first place, because it's just it used to be just part of the council, like a department of the council. I'm assuming, right, run by engineers, and it's just like you put money into roads and road. You know, it's not a business.
It was our friends in central government who knew how to run local government so much better than us.
Right, Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for an excellent submission and well listed for us to read. My question's around the document here on page 6, and it speaks, I guess, to your point 4 about speculative investment funds. It says income to council from a diversified investment fund is expected to be more consistent and higher compared to Aurora Energy's dividend forecast. Did you get any sense from this document on, say, the 5, 10, 20-year forward dividend payments out of Aurora?
Not really.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And going back to your number 4. I'm sorry, gosh, it's been a long few days. Going back to number 4 around the speculative investment funds, and there's again suggestion that we would be, I think it came from Councillor Van der Vis earlier, he cited an example elsewhere of a 7.3% return. And would you sort of clarify that your point is to get that sort of return you do have to take certain risks? And ask that in the context we currently have the Waipuri Fund, which is a far safer risk in the sense that quite a large proportion of that fund is just in fixed bonds and cash.
Right. Yeah. I mean, then if it's in a fund that's safer, and then it's less, then what's the point of, you know, like if the whole point is that you can, if the only benefit would come from putting it in a high growth fund, then you're exposing yourself to more risk. So you might as well just keep it. You know, if it's the choice between a low risk fund and keeping it, why not just keep it? Yeah.
And I guess go further to that, a number of submitters and probably submitters that know a lot more than we know have suggested that keeping Aurora is, in essence, if we're thinking selfishly about the ratepayer's future, is a licence to print money. Would you agree with that?
I think so, especially as it's a monopoly. And I should also say that there are models where they're not. So I think Waitaki have a sort of trust model, which seems to be, from my just general reading of that, a far sounder approach. And you don't have those risks of. See, I would argue that the whole thing with the failure to invest, you know, the power pole thing, and there was a whistleblower and stuff. Probably, okay, well, maybe there was money being taken out for the stadium, or I don't know. But also, if your emphasis is on dividends, then that money is, instead of being invested in, you know, like that's over and above what you're going to invest. So if you're going to take money as dividends, then you're going to have less to invest. If you invest all the money that you make, then you get better investment. So yeah, the sort of dividends thing is kind of, seems to be a bit of a, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Witherell.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Thank you for your submission today. There's been quite a lot of focus over the last few days on submissions regarding good debt and bad debt. I would like to ask you a question around good income and bad income. Good income being from investments and bad income coming from ratepayers. It's always good if someone else pays the bill, in my regard. Do you know how many good income investments the city has that helps run the city?
Not specifically, no.
Microphone.
Oh,
please.
sorry, not specifically, no. But I'm assuming that you mean that there are some.
Well, with 70% of our eggs in one basket as in Aurora, which isn't giving the city a return, do you feel that that is problematic as an income, regular income, which we're not receiving at present?
Right, well, I mean, I guess the thing with income is that it's paid for through power bills. And, you know, so the income from Aurora has come through. So if you reduce that income by not having it as an asset anymore, then, but though that income still has to come like that. That could just mean that then power bills on a private company just go up, and so all ratepayers are also electricity users. So it's just swapping it around. Like you're right. There's that if you're, I don't know if I'm making it clear enough, but if that would be the case if there were only some people who were using electricity and some were not. But if all ratepayers are also electricity users, then it makes sense to just keep it as a, yeah.
So therefore, if we're not getting an income to run the city, the income will have to come from ratepayers and basically ratepayers only.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Mayhem.
Thank you so much for your very thorough submission. I liked reading that. Lots of people have referred to Aurora as capital hungry. So at the moment, the model is that the area of growth is Central Otago and the Lakes area, so they pay more as a line charge. Do you think that works? You know, so less line charge for Dunedin and more for the areas where the investment is at the moment?
I think that's appropriate. If there's more growth, if a certain area is doing better, then that should be. And if they need more, you can break it down like that. And again, that's something where a public body with oversight can help manage that, rather than a private entity will tend to have a shorter term focus. And so, whereas if you look, you can step right back and think about it as a council and where we might be in 10, 20 years. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation.
No more questions.
That's
Yep.
it. We've
Okay.
covered the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Ms. Naomi Wilson. Sorry? All right. Thank you. So next we have Mr. Edward Allison and Mr. Hawani Langsbury. Good afternoon. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Your Worship, the Mayor, councillors, members of the panel for the annual plan. E rere ana ngā mihi mai o tātou nei hapu kia koutou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today, and I'm principally talking about the Harrington Point Road safety improvement, i.e. the Peninsula connection. I first wrote to the Mayor, I think in January, about that. I put a submission into this process personally, and then the Runing put a submission in as well in my name, and I also spoke briefly to the ORC-DCC joint hearing on Dunedin Futures on the same subject. I have circulated some evidence or information related to our position, and that is more about giving more context to our position, i.e. it's not a road to nowhere. There's a bit of history and connection that goes with this part of the Peninsula Road. It links us to the Otago Māori Reserve that was specifically set aside by our chiefs during the Otago block sale in 1844. It is, because of its importance to the past, present, and also future generations, it is the centre of our existence. enhanced by the proximity to the harbour, its natural resources and the waterborne mobility that it provided our people. It was also where the treaty was signed in 1840 by Karatai and Korako, and the first sale deed entered into by Kaitahu was negotiated on the edge of the Otago Harbour in 1844. We have seen many changes in the harbour and its surrounds over recent generations. It remains an important part of our hapu identity and mana. The road out to the heads was built in around 1870s, 1880s, and it took Hori Karei Taiaroa, who was a Member of Parliament, continuous efforts in Parliament to encourage the authorities to build the road to the marae. It was done, but it was the last of that roading done. The Otako section of the Harrington Point Road was tar sealed in the early 1950s, just before my memory started, really. But I am reliably informed that it, because it wasn't sealed, it secured a great culture and identity and social life there was just pretty idyllic, really. And when the road was sealed, that started to change. And it's continued to change as the road's been upgraded over the years. In 1968, the Wahine storm actually obliterated part of the road. It was a massive landslip that the Peninsula County Council couldn't repair. So, fortunately, I have circulated in my paper, I said there were two kaumātua on the riding for the council. It was actually one, it was my father at the time. I was thinking of Michelle's grandfather, who was there before him. What happened is Dad must have talked to her grandfather, because we got the road over the Taiaroa estate. That's called the Desert Road now. That's how it came to be. But it was because we had people there who were able to make decisions that we got that road reinstated very quickly. The Otago Harbour remains central to our values. The historical reclamation of hundreds of acres, I don't know exactly how many, I've heard 700, has been had a significant impact on the health and life supporting capacity of the harbour. Those estuarine nursery areas were those prime areas taken for reclamation. So it impacted our harbour, affected our fishery, and it's been an issue for our people over the generations. Projects such as the capital dredging of the harbour for Port Otago, very important of course, but equally the first round was devastating to the harbour, and that is why we took great interest in the second round of dredging that was consented early 2000s, which has had much less impact as a result on the health of the harbour. So what I'm saying is the road is a part, and the roading infrastructure around the harbour is a part of that connection to the harbour. The roading has removed 90% of that shoreline that once contained particular habitats important to the wider health of the harbour. There is very little rocky foreshore left. And if we get our extension at Otago, you'll take out some of the remaining parts of that rocky foreshore. One of my most rewarding kaitiaki roles was working with the city when they took wastewater out of the harbour from being discharged into the harbour. And that was on the Peninsula side, by burying a pipe down the middle of the road. Right down, Mac Bay, Company Bay, also across the western side of the harbour. And ultimately, no more wastewater being discharged into the harbour. A very satisfying project to be involved in, working with the city engineers at the time. What followed on from there was something mooted early 2000s, was the widening of the road and lifting of the road as well. And so we were engaged in that, and it was to be completed in sections. The city agreed to that. Eventually, I think it was around 2012, and it was to be completed in sections by 2023-24. The Otako section was to be about the fourth one, I think, of the sections to be undertaken, and that was swapped to put Company Bay ahead. We agreed to that, thinking that our turn would still come. In fact, it hasn't. And what happened was that then the joint cycleway program seemed to merge, and that changed the whole dynamic of things. And then we were seeing announcements last year that the project had been completed, and that was of dismaying for us to find and hear that our section, and those other sections actually are equally important below Portobello School and along the straight from Harwood, but particularly at Otako it's dangerous. It's a narrow road. Some of those corners are literally not negotiable with two big vehicles meeting on that road. It's simply unsafe to walk, ride or run. And so we are concerned for the safety of the community who have to use it daily, but equally for people who commute there and back. And we have many tourists, other service industries, and of course the marae's almost non-stop, busy. So we are urging the council in your annual plan to make provision for the completion of those links that have been that remain there to be completed. We understand it will require reclamation. That was a big deal for us to agree to the reclamation for the balance of that Peninsula connection and down the Port Chalmers side as well. We have a view that continued reclamation of the harbour without considering the ecosystem and the impacts on the harbour is not sustainable, and so we have a Runanga policy opposing further reclamation without due regard to the impacts. There is also an important site there, Te Ana Korakorako, related to the story of Tarawai. It is actually a wahi tapu, so if there is work done there, we have to be careful with how work proceeds in that area. But I am urging you, as upoko of the Runanga and with our Runanga whānau here today, to support this submission. The importance to us, to our connections, to our history, and I believe to our contribution to the Dunedin City and to the region, that work is taken seriously and provided for in your budgets going forward. Thank you very much for listening to me and hearing this evidence. I have sent it through, so you might have the written material, but also a map that I found in my filing cabinets by mistake a few weeks ago when I was looking for something else. The maps come from 2012, which were circulated for us to agree to the sequence of the roading, and also there was a typed schedule of the actual dates when those sections were going to be undertaken. So thank you very much, Your Worship the Mayor, and I'm open for any questions.
Well, interestingly enough, we have many, starting with Councillor Weatherall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Edward, for coming along today. It's always a real pleasure to hear your concerns, and I would like to think there wouldn't be one person around this table that doesn't agree with you, and it's just simply got to happen. However, as I say, not a matter of if, but when, and how on earth are we going to fund it? And I'm sure that's the only stumbling block. It's only money, But at the end of the day, it must definitely happen, and I'm sure we'll all work together eventually to make that work. I have had some contact with an ex-community board member, Christine Neal, and her comment to us, and we heard it loud and clear: do it once, and do it right. My comment to her was, we have to live within our means to do so, and that is the problem. And she has touched base with me in regards to the history of the Bay Road, and she wanted to come up with a solution, which was good for her, and she ran it past me, and I haven't run it past council or anything like that, but since you're joining on the spot and both of you are here, I think it's a good idea. You may already be aware of it, but historically, which I never knew, there was originally a toll on the Bay Road. And I'm sure it was probably someone on the back of a horse with a shotgun. I don't really know how it worked. But I don't even know whether that could ever work in today's environment. But there are toll roads around, and around not necessarily around New Zealand much, but definitely overseas to pay for.
Excuse me, Your Worship.
Yeah, questions there.
Yes, there was a toll. It's by that stone building just before the Vauxhall boat shed back in the, I'm not sure the era, a long time ago. Yes, I am aware in major projects, particularly where they're on state highway ones or if there's a lot of traffic. So the load is evenly shared. Where if there is a levy, I think if there were a levy on the Peninsula to cover the cost of doing that extra work when there's already been 79 million or whatever pumped into it, the load would be unduly wagered on the people who live there out on the Otako end. So, in a word, I'd reject it. Sorry.
And in regards to reclamation, you touched on reclamation, and I presume you're not too keen on reclamation around the harbour edge. Or the upper reaches. It's been suggested to me that from the Scout Hall actually at Vauxhall that they would like to sort of extend that somewhat. They've got various reasons for doing so. Would you be open to discussions about that?
Yes, Councillor, I'm aware there are many desires around the whole of harbour edge to reclaim for this, that and the next thing. No, it must be under a strategy that has thoroughly investigated the impacts, cumulative, not by, if you says, what is it, killed by, what's it?
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, anyway, I think you've got the gist. Yeah, look, we raise the flag so the community are aware there are issues with reclamation, and we just urge the authorities who are responsible for approving or not that they take proper cognizance of the effects. And they've got to understand the dredging has effects as well. There are many cumulative effects, and the harbour is a fragile asset and a tonga in our view. So we urge precaution. Yes.
Thank you. Now, I urge very concise questions, please, councillors, because we're running well behind, and there's a lot of people that do have questions, and I think it's important they get asked and answered. So we're looking for concise questions and possibly even concise answers, but we'll see. Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. Kia Edward and Hawani. My question is, this is labelled as safety improvement project. I guess this is the crux of this, is you consider the road dangerous, especially around the points. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, and it's reinforced every time we drive the rest of the road and enjoy the safety of that road, and absolutely enjoy seeing people in leisure exercising or recreating. It's just a good joy to see, and it always reminds us of what we haven't got in our part of it.
And if this road was in a lot of other areas around the city or even around the country, it would be taken extremely seriously to be invested in to improve, do you think?
I think it would, Councillor, because it remains a standout section for the fact that it hasn't been upgraded to the same standard as the rest of the Peninsula Road.
Thank you. Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Edward and Hoani. First question is, just to be clear, the agreement you had to reclamation included the consent for these parts of the road that are currently incomplete, yes?
That's correct.
Second question, is your recollection thus that the reason for the resequencing was in order for council to get the majority of the project across the line with Wakatahi, and the criteria being that around population, and the population criteria didn't fit the sections out there? Is that your memory, because you were the one it was negotiated with?
That is my understanding, Councillor, yes.
And subsidiary to that, I notice on this map here, there's a 1 out at the end. Does that mean that the implication was that your section, the section out that we're talking about, was number 1 on the list?
That's true, Your Worship, it was.
It's a very concise answer, thank you. Councillor Gilbert.
Kia ora, thank you. And I just want to sort of follow on really from Councillor Gary in terms of what's been said before about reclamation. You've got a point in here about that additional reclamation was a point that was understood when supporting the Peninsula connection. You also then say that there are some important sites to avoid, disturbance you've already mentioned. One, I just want to make sure that the sites that you're referring to, are they known to the council yet? Has that been part of any discussion, or that is yet to be part of a discussion?
Well, when I was engaged in those early programs in building those sections, yes, we had that kōrero, but there's probably been 3 or 4 staff changes since that time. So it's a matter, that's why I've put it in there, to make sure it comes back up to the top and we don't forget it, and it's carried on to the next echelon, whoever is the engineers involved. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and kia ora, Edward and Hoani. And I, like you, am perplexed around the narrative that Te Ako Hatako is completed, Te Aramoana is completed. My question relates to, in fact, my question is related to wishing I had a magic wand, because I would wave it and do it all. But in the absence of that, and in your submission, you list the 3 sections awaiting A, B and C. If we were fiscally constrained and were only able to do a bit at a time, is that the order you would like them completed in?
Thank you, Councillor. I do think that's the order of seriousness. Yes, I am concerned about the piece below Portobello School, but there's probably a way to overcome that issue short term. But the Otago bus shelter to the fisheries is quite dangerous, yes. I'm quite concerned that there will be a serious accident there.
I've nearly come a cropper myself there.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Kia ora koroa. I have a question that I might like to address to Mr Lansbury first of all. This is about the feedback from the tourist sector. I understand that you work at the Reliable Trust Centre at Bluepingus Pukakura and you would have high knowledge of this. Do you ever hear feedback from bus drivers and tourists about the perceived safety of that piece of road?
I had enough of your question probably to answer it before you finish it. Just probably to qualify, I'm sitting here supporting Edward as a Runanga member, but I also have a separate submission and slot where I'll talk exactly to that following Edward finishing. And I do cover your question in the evidence I'm about to present.
So if I were to ask any more questions about the tourist numbers, the value of wildlife, harbour health, etc., you would be able to answer them in the next submission? Okay, so my next question is around a councillor brought up about living within the means, I guess, of council's budget, and I just wonder if you would agree that road access and safety is around a long-term and intergenerational asset, and this is why you wish for this to be done as a high priority.
And just the reason I didn't answer the last question was not to take away from the Runanga submission that sits there. The submission that I'll be talking to was on behalf of the Royal Albatross Centre and the other tourist operators on the peninsula.
I guess I was asking that with the Runanga hat on, is about that this is not about, I shouldn't say this is not about living within your means, but I guess that we're looking at this as in the road access and the safety is actually an intergenerational asset. That's where I was, I guess, going with living within any comment on living within our means. Whichever wants to answer it.
I'm happy to answer that one on behalf of the Runanga. I think we don't have to go back much further than the 60s when that road was still gravel, and understanding that other infrastructure also doesn't pass that point. And if you look at the Otako Marae and the amount of use that it gets these days, as a Runanga member and a local, it can take me 3 months to find a slot to hold a hui there because everyone else in the region or the city are using it. So it's not just tourist operators, it's the entire Dunedin community that are making use of the marae, and they're travelling to and from over that section, including MPs and the commissioning of new regional commanders for the police, and all of those people travel over that short section of road. So the infrastructure down there, whether it's reticulation of water and sewerage or roading or Aurora providing us with the power that needs to be there, it's an important part of the city, but it's also the area which was where the city was founded from.
So would you say part of the challenge is around kotahi funding and the fact that it seems to be population based? Would you say that actually the population is not around 200, the population is a lot higher than that, given that it is a cultural centre of the city, and that if you are talking that it is fully booked every day, that there would be hundreds of people, if not thousands of people on Waitangi Day especially, coming and going to use the marae?
That'd be correct. And just to answer the numbers question, Royal Albatross Centre sees over 100,000 visitors, predominantly for independent travellers, probably 2 to 4 people in a vehicle. So that's a significant amount of vehicle movements beyond what the community does. And the last figures that were put in front of us, Otago Peninsula tourism, or the wider tourism, is a $200 million sector.
Thank you. And can I tease out penguins and albatross at the moment, because they are taonga to the Runanga, because I want to not just talk about ask about the economic impact, but I also want to ask about the harbour health, which is what you've brought up, and part of the harbour health is obviously the fish, the toro, how can I not say that? The penguins, etc. So I just wonder about the impact of the access, both via visitors and then by the Department of Conservation, etc., coming out to look after those animals as well.
Yes, and Tuaki and there are many other taonga. And in fact, one of the kaumātua wrote about the number of species that were plentiful in the harbour. In fact, even when I was young, what was there and what is not there now. So it's in a lifetime noticeable. So I think that's what we bring to the discussion, is observation, memory over time of what was there and what has changed and what is changing, in the realisation these things are sensitive and we need to be conscious of how we operate within and around those areas, especially where there are many taonga. So yes, we are kaitiaki for all of those values, species and what have you. So I was hoping that the submission I bring today has that holistic feel about it, and it's not just the road, but there are many other elements and aspects to this kōrero. So thank you for your question.
Very good. Councillor O'Malley.
Kia ora, Edward and Juani. We were on the FDS together, and I think you sat back at this point. I can't remember if you didn't when Edward gave his presentation. And I talked to you a little bit about the cost of, without the Wakatahi subsidy, the cost is quite prohibitive. It's more or less in the 24 million mark. And then we talked about can we take it at bite-sized pieces, which is more or less where we're here again today. It is unfortunate strategically we didn't take into account how Wakatahi does its BCR calculations, because I would have started with that section first and finished with Vauxhall last, and then we would have got it finished, completed. But we've gone past that now, and I guess the other thing we've gone past is the retaining wall on the road at Portobello when it got built. I don't think that's wide enough to take a cycleway next to it, is it? So we're looking at, I think that section is 10 million to do that section. One of the things we talked about was that when you're doing things like the BCR calculations, or when we look about investment, we always go population-based or road usage-based, and that often means that the cut-off line is somewhere near Portobello. And I raised the concept that we obviously have treaty obligations as well that we must be living up to, and that we should take that calculation and then put another multiplier on it, which is the treaty obligations, and that would get us over the threshold for investment. Do you want to? You already have, but re-comment on that this is not just about a population-based investment, that Otako itself is a special place and we need to pay attention to that.
Yes, I think at that hearing I said yes, we would be happy to collaborate with the two councils at that time about making interventions to government or whoever is required, NZTA. And I think that's your question in part now, and we would be bringing that historical treaty kōrero to the table as well, as it is currently. Two of our graves at Aurora are nationally important, and the government upkeep them. So there's a number of reasons why there are many indicators of that historical link as a place, as a first, and somewhere of importance, I think, to the city.
But we shouldn't wait.
Agreed. No, because we're doing this now, and we have the opportunity, or you have, sorry. It's your task, but he waka kotahi. It's another time frame.
You, Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. To cut to the chase, Edward, is it your expectation that you would see in the draft budget for the 9-year plan in years 1, 2 and 3, the 3 stages, and a funding line and a budget line?
You put it very well. Thank you. Yes, I would, Councillor.
And preparations for that to happen to be done from now till then, knowing that the consent is granted, the design is agreed but may need just to be checked, and so the preparation heads that they can be undertaken in those years.
Yes, all of those other projects I referred to had quite long lead-in times, a lot of work to be done to prepare before a spade is moved. Yes.
And final question, Councillor O'Malley.
I just want to follow up with Councillor Gary's question. If we put that in years 1, 2 and 3, that effectively means we're funding the whole lot. And I'm just wondering, actually what I was going to answer the question is, should Te Pai Māori have more operational parts to its agenda so that we can actually talk in that environment about the specific stuff in a fast-moving, quick exchange of information environment?
Very good question, I think, Councillor, and I think that would be a really constructive way to utilise Te Pai Māori, yes.
And there we have it. We've covered the questions. Thank you very much for your submission.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us today.
Meke te kora o tau kai puke, te manuhaia, te rapu ke kura, te mauka tapu e.
Kia ora. And now we welcome Mr. Hawani Lansbury to the chair. To the chair.
Chair, yes. I have a presentation as part of what I want to put in front of you today. If someone can arrange to plug my laptop in. Just got a port on that, so it seems what you got there, or I have an adapter if you need it.
Okay.
Kia ora. Thank you for putting on another week of hearings. I'm sure that's not necessarily how you're seeing it, but I wasn't here last week. I was in Wellington with most of the other Dunedin-based tourist operators at Trends, promoting the region and the Otago Peninsula as the place that we want visitors to go. So I will start with Te Awa Otako, or the Peninsula Collection, and the 3 sections yet to be completed in the order of priority. And the first bit is Allison's Road to Otako Fisheries. It's the most dangerous section of the road in the project, was originally of the highest priority. I've taken the opportunity to speak with various other tourist operators that use the road, and they all agree it's the most unsafe section of the road, both before the start of the creation of the shared pathway and since the road improvements have been put in place. Specifically, I spoke with the driver trainer for Ritchie's, and he informed me that there's no safe way to traverse that section without the buses having to cross the centre line on blind corners. I encounter this daily as a local resident and have at least once had to stop on a corner after a bus wedged itself against my vehicle. The only way for safety concerns to be addressed is for the safety improvements to be completed as a high priority for the DCC. I've noted twice in the last 12 months where the road has been underwater due to spring tide. The next section is the Portobello school cutting. The shared pathway needs to be established to link Portobello to the bus turnaround area at Portobello Bay, just on the past the school. How we go about that will come down to detailed design, and not my area of expertise, but I know discussions have been had there. The other section is the Desert Road section, from Harwood Turnoff to Ellison Road. The design work's already been completed, and consultation and agreements were completed for all those 3 sections with the affected landowners at the beginning of the Peninsula Connections projects. These may need to be revisited, but were effectively completed at that time. So quality of the camera depends on which vehicle I was driving. But this is a regular occurrence on the Peninsula Road, is following larger camper vans that in that section probably shouldn't have been on the wrong side of the road. But every other tourist you follow on that road is crossing over the centre line.
This camera looks to be on the other side too.
Yeah, well, it's pretty typical coming into that corner because of those concrete blocks, and someone's either removed them intentionally on that corner. If there's nothing coming for the next half kilometre, you do tend to, what do we call it, massage the corner. So this is just entering Otako as you come in off the desert road. So I took the opportunity in the last few days to see how closely the buses follow the bus timetable and strategically place myself to enable us to share this information. So we're about to go through a little cutting that, in someone's wisdom, they decide to put little concrete barriers on either side, so it forces the larger vehicles to go right up to the white line. So certainly nowhere for those tourists that want to get out and take photos or to walk along here to be able to do it safely. And it's not so bad when you meet a bus that's on its outward journey from the city. They tend to be able to provide a reasonable amount of space on the road, except for the corner that's just coming up by the Otako fisheries. When I was talking to the driver trainer for the bus drivers, I suggested I would give him a camera and he could stick it in the front of his bus. So I'm sure he's not going to be too concerned that I trailed a few of his drivers and to enable us to share this with yourselves. So this is the route going back the other way. And it is quite difficult to appreciate from the back of a bus how much of the road they require. And over the couple of days that I did this, I'm sure it wasn't the same driver, so we can't say it's just one driver who isn't able to negotiate the road. Yeah, no, it was all bus noises, so I took them out. So I didn't pre-arrange anything with any of these car drivers or with any of these bus drivers. But this one here, I decided you're probably going to get a better view if someone stood on the side of the road. So I took my life in my own hands and I walked down that section of road where you just saw that tourist walking. and waited there for a bus to arrive. I knew it was coming because I saw it head down the road to turn around. And you can see there how far out it has to be. Well, you can't, just watch. There is no way, talking to the company, that they can get around that corner without crossing over onto the wrong side of the road. And I'm not sure that all our accident statistics turn up in... what happens, this was 2 days ago on one of the sections that's not completed, just coming off the end of the, prior to the desert road. Talking to the landowner there, he said 6 times in the last 10 years as he had vehicles in that section on his property. The lady who happens to be my neighbour in this one was fine. Well, as fine as you can be after you've rolled your car and end up in hospital all night. But we're fortunate that we don't see fatalities, so often the statistics don't get picked up. So this was a local going off the road, hitting a fence post, ending up in a paddock. That statistic may not turn up anywhere. So if we're reliant on crash statistics to determine the safety of the road, then we're not always getting an accurate representation of what's there. So that covers the part of my submission that deals with the roading issue. And there's a couple of other things that if you're going to do the road, you may as well be doing it at the same time. And one of those is maintaining that shared pathway. The shared pathway needs to be maintained as they're the gateway to the Otago Peninsula. The focus of Wild Dunedin, there's a significant focus on the ecology, sustainability and promotion of the Otago Peninsula during the annual Wild Dunedin Festival. The gateway lacks regular love and attention from the contractors that are responsible for the maintenance of the Portobello and Harrington Point roads. During any rain event, we see plumes of sediment from most of the culverts along the roadway entering the harbour. It's not only on the peninsula side of the harbour that we see this, but from the entire catchment, with much of the stormwater originating from the roadside or from DCC reserves on the West Harbour side. The minimum expectation of the DCC as a good neighbour to the harbour would be to reduce the impact of rain events on the sensitive receiving environment of the harbour. The only other issue I deal with here is water and sewerage, and the opportunity to include the provision of reticulated services to Otago and Harrington Point would most efficiently be provided during the roading works to complete the Peninsula Connection project. The DCC need to take the opportunity as outlined in the FDS to update their designs for the remaining 3 sections to include the necessary laying of pipes to meet this infrastructure need. Finally, on the provision of drinking water to the Otako Pukekura end of the Otago Peninsula, the main contractor that provides the trucking of water to the residents and businesses on the peninsula as of about 3 weeks ago has stopped providing this service after 27 years. And that contractor filled their truck from a hydrant in Allens Beach Road. Having recently requested quotes from the remaining water carriers in Dunedin, I was surprised to see that the price doubled from some of those contractors. So I picked up the phone and I rang them and wanted to know why the price of their water was so much more than what we were currently being provided with. And the indication from them was that there's only 6 hydrants in the Dunedin City that are certified for potable water, and they're all in the city, none of them are on the Otago Peninsula. And with regard to the Royal Albatross Centre alone, in the last 12 months we've used 1 million litres of water, so it's a significant amount of truck movements that are required. And we also have all our sewage going out of the Royal Albatross Centre back to Green Island for treatment there. So with a similar amount of wastewater being removed, I discussed this with the DCC group manager, which I think off the top of my head might have been Dave Ward, responsible for 3 waters only a couple of weeks ago, and he informed me that there were only 6 hydrants that were clean enough for filling of water tankers for potable water, and none of these were on the Otago Peninsula. We regularly have our water tested as part of our cafe food control requirements, and it is always up to standard, with this water being trucked from a hydrant in Portobello. Obviously, from our own testing, there is not a quality issue here, but there is a significant sustainability issue with the number of truck movements to and from the city to provide water to ourselves and other operators. The DCC need to certify a hydrant in Portobello if the current policy requires this. We understand that we will have reticulated services in the next 10 years under the FTS, but till then, can the DCC enable the Otago Peninsula community, including ecotourism operators, to achieve our sustainability goals by addressing this oversight? Kia ora, that's all it is for me. Happy to take questions.
Well, we need some really concise questions, otherwise we won't be having a break. Councillor Gary.
Kia ora, Hoani, thank you for that really fulsome submission. Just on the point of the water, so just to clarify, does that mean that each time they fill up, they've got to come back into town and go back out? Thank you. I wanted to ask you about the time that the road was closed. We've heard from some residents out there around the Peninsula Connection project and the incomplete sections around it being single access. What was the implication of the road being blocked in terms of the albatross?
With regard to albatross, or probably any wildlife requirements out there, it meant that it wasn't able to be serviced from the city where DOC have its office. So we were fortunate we have some rangers and other qualified people that were on the other side of the block road that were enabled to do that. But it's not to say that that will always be in place. And the workaround was that they also contracted a boat to bring them in and drop them at Pilot's Beach.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thanks, Juane. It's another question, sort of like the Pai Maori question, and that is Donna Matahari Atariki is the mana whenua rep on infrastructure. As the chair, I'm actually asking a question of more related to this: is how do we make that position work more effectively as well? So when you were talking about provisions of Three Waters and coordinating the Three Waters provisions along with the work of transport. Have you got any ideas how we can make sure that we are communicating even better on that so that it gets brought to infrastructure as a right level of item?
I don't know if I can answer the question specific with regard to Donna Matahari and her role.
It can be raised in Te Pai Maori, perhaps.
Yeah, and also just as a runaka relationship between the committees. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Kia ora, Hawaii. Tourist questions. So I understand that the Otago Peninsula Trust is a charitable trust. I was just wondering, when you were saying that the price of water was going up, about how much the trust spends on water and sewage every year.
So in the past financial year, it was around 70,000. But if we've got a doubling in our water cost, we're going to see that go over 100,000.
And my next question is, there's a number of tourist operations out there. Some of them have tens of thousands of people visiting. I asked Paul Pope the other day that if pre-COVID, I guess there would have been around 200,000 visitors going out to that end of the peninsula, and they would all have needs for water and sewage. Bit of maths. Do you think you could put a figure on what it might be costing all of those tourist operations to bring in the water? How many extra trips that might be up and down? Because I would assume they've all got separate trucks going up and down with these things. And is that putting a lot more pressure on the road as well? So A, cost, B, numbers, C, pressure.
I think the Royal Albatross Centre is at the end of the road, so we kind of are seen as the toilet location. So it does mean that we're probably loaded a little bit higher. But if we're at 100k, is what I'm going to have to budget for the next financial year, I'd be surprised if any of the other operators are under 50. And the single toilet at Tauroni, which is reasonably easy to access, is probably insufficient for the number of people that are coming out.
I guess I was just because of asking for the, for the Portobello thingy to be, hydrant to be certified about there's not just the locals in there, that there's also a huge amount of money that it's going to cost. Tourist operators are there, most of whom I would think were trusts working for wildlife conservation, and I'm just kind of, maybe you can get back to me on a figure that's actually going to cost, and the cost to council of certifying the hydrant would probably be fairly minor compared to the impact on the cost on the operators. Would that be true?
I would think you're correct, but what I was trying to demonstrate before, because we have to do 3 monthly water tests and all our water come from that one hydrant, and we have no issues with meeting the water quality standard to use within the cafe, I would think there should be almost zero cost in council certifying that, because at the moment it's being used by a contractor and no contaminants are getting into the water and being picked up in our testing. There are a significant amount of locals that also buy water in, and under climate change we're getting warmer and drier, and if that contractor that used to be there is no longer there, it's going to put a lot of extra pressure on some of the locals there, the lower socio-economic part, to no longer be able to get water in if the price has just doubled.
Councillor Vandevers.
Given that the Peninsula connection for many years has had much more spent on it than any other part of the city, and we now have reduced government funding, do you agree that we need to prioritise our road improvement spending on those areas where we have serious accident and fatality statistics?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation.
No, thanks so much.
Thank you.
I will send a copy of my presentation to the Government Support Officer for distribution.
Thank you. And our next presentation is from Ms. Bridget Irving from Southern Edge Hub Farms Limited.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. So I'm Bridget Irving. I'm counsel for Southern Edge Hub Farms Limited, and I'm here just to support a submission filed on behalf of Southern Edge in relation to funding for the Mosgiel Strategic Transport Study. So I'm just going to quickly address you on that, and then obviously willing to take any questions. So obviously Southern Edge Hub Farms Limited has promoted a logistics hub at Mosgiel, and recently participated in the future development strategy process, and was successful in obtaining the acknowledgement of an indicative site for a freight hub in the future development strategy. The concept of a freight hub has found mention in numerous council and regional council strategies from as early as 2013, and these documents include the Regional Land Transport Plan for 2021 to 2031, Dunedin's Economic Development Strategy from 2013, and most recently the Carbon Zero Plan. Specifically, the Carbon Plan includes an item which is to encourage and support key stakeholders to establish an inland freight hub or hubs. The Freight Hub initiative has the potential to deliver a significant proportion of the required reductions in transport emissions set out in the Carbon Zero Implementation Plan. Removing heavy traffic from State Highway 1 into the city and out to Port Chalmers will also have significant benefits in terms of road safety, maintenance, reduced road congestion, and in the pursuit of increased active transport. It is difficult, in my view, to identify another initiative that has the potential to hit on as many of the strategic priorities identified in the future development strategy than the logistics hub. Establishment of the freight hub will not be without its effects, however. One of the matters that has arisen as one of the key areas of concern to the Mosgiel community is the potential for increased heavy traffic movements on Gordon Road. Southern Edge believe that the logistics hub will be heavy traffic neutral in its early stages, and this is because there will be more product put on trains which will take trucks off the road. So in some respects, whether a heavy traffic bypass is established is neither here nor there from Southern Edge's point of view. However, Southern Edge is cognisant of the wider community concern and the long-term efficiency issues associated with Gordon Road operating at low levels of service. And to that end, Southern Edge hope that the logistics park can lend momentum to the process to address the long-running issues with Gordon Road. To that end, it filed its submission in relation to this annual plan. The submission comes off the back of the decision of the hearing panel in relation to the future development strategy, which accepted the Southern Edge submission to identify an indicative site for the freight hub and include a new line item in Table 11 of the strategy, which sets out the transport infrastructure improvements required to serve existing and future development capacity and support a well-functioning urban environment in Mosgiel. That line item requires the strategic transport study for Mosgiel to be completed. Since the FDS decision, Southern Edge has turned its mind to addressing the various constraints that were identified at the indicative site, and it is full steam ahead in that regard. In seeking an allocation of funding for the strategic transport study, it is inviting the Council to work alongside it and other stakeholders, as anticipated in the Carbon Zero implementation plan, to address the wider transport issues at Mosgiel. That's it.
Thank you. We have a question from Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Irvine. As you'll be aware, I recused myself from that final decision on the FDS. And I just want to point out that in the RLTP 2131, when the site was when a optimal site was put forward as south of Dunedin, it was south of Dunedin. It wasn't southern Dunedin, and I know that explicitly because I put that into the RLTP. And is it true that at the FDS we didn't get anything from Dines in the form of expert transport evidence?
Sorry, microphone.
We didn't provide evidence from an expert transport engineer, but Pete Dines spoke, given his experience, obviously, in the transport and logistics sector.
Yeah, but he also said that the bypass could be built for 55 million, which we know is completely inaccurate. So if it's not expert evidence, how can we take that evidence? My question really is that this activity is already planned to happen, but the current heavy traffic bypass design would be for moving heavy traffic that is there right now. If traffic has to come off State Highway 1 to get to rail by going behind Mosgiel, that will increase the load on the heavy traffic bypass than what is currently going to have to be designed. Who's going to pay for that?
At this point, what we're submitting at this annual plan is funding to support the study that would answer those questions, Councillor. And I think what the FDS identified was the need for all stakeholders, council, Waka Kotahi, regional council, private freight operators, to work together on that. That is consistent with the line item in the carbon emissions plan. And so what Southern Edge was wanting to ensure is that the opportunity was not lost through this annual plan process for council to be an active participant in that process. So I don't have the answers to all the questions around funding and all of that. There are obviously a lot of discussions that need to go into that, questions around timing and so on. But if we don't start those conversations and doing that work, then no progress will get made at all.
Very good. And I assume then that Southern Edge would have no issues with looking at all of the potential freight transfer sites other than just the one behind Mosgiel.
Southern Edge is looking at addressing the constraints that have been identified in relation to the indicative site in the future development strategy. That's its focus.
I cooperating with presentation of evidence, how you'd move your transport around, where your truck movements are, to a greater analysis of all of it, or they only want to deal with their own site?
Are you talking about other freight hubs potentially, or I don't quite understand the question.
Where does freight go? Where does it originate? Where does it terminate? What are the volumes? How many trucks are moving?
100%. I mean, that's work they're already starting to do because they need to understand that for their own planning purposes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Houlihan.
Just following on from that, the people you represent, are they fixed on Mosgiel or are they open to other sites?
Southern Edge Hub Farms has acquired about 50 hectares at the Mosgiel site, adjacent to the existing rail line. That is where they believe is the optimum location for the freight hub, and they are working through the constraints that are identified at that site. There are certainly, I think, opportunities, as I understand it, for other facilities that may utilise or provide services for different types of freight. And the solution that Southern Edge are pursuing would not be to foreclose those other options.
So in its budgeting, has your group got funding to help support the cost of the traffic bypass, what Councillor O'Malley mentioned before, because that would be a huge cost?
So we haven't had any of those conversations in the sense that that is the work that needs to be done. We need to understand strategically what is the optimum solution for Mosgiel. And this is not just a freight hub issue. I think what everyone would acknowledge is that issues associated with Gordon Road, the operation of key intersections, are long-standing and arise not just from heavy traffic, but from increased traffic movements associated with residential development at Mosgiel and so on. So there's a broader issue there, and that needs to be confronted alongside heavy traffic movements along Gordon Road and what implications that has for the residents of Mosgiel. So the strategic transport study, I think, is a broader study than simply the consequences of a logistics park. But Southern Edge is saying it's a willing participant in initiating and having those discussions and being a part of that.
Thank you. Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you. Just a very quick question, just to be clear. Southern Edge Hub Farms is 100% owned by Dines Transport, is that correct?
Currently, yes. It is anticipated that the logistics hub will be a joint venture between Dines Transport and Port Otago.
Very good. Done. I think another question, Councillor O'Malley.
And when that activates, will other carriers like Main Freight and Toll be able to use the facility?
Short answer is I don't know the answer to that. My understanding is operators like Main Freight are operating a different class of freight that wouldn't necessarily come out to the logistics park. But it's certainly intended to be a regional facility. So if it was useful for the likes of Main Freight and Toll to go out there, then I can't imagine why they wouldn't be able to.
Except they can't go to the Icon facilities now, which is...
Well, I can't answer that for Icon, but I would suspect what we're talking about here is a much larger facility than any of the operators are currently utilising. And there will no doubt be efficiencies associated with that that may mean other operators want to be out there too. But we're not there yet in terms of the full development of the proposal. So I suspect those will be all things that evolve over time.
Thank you. I think that has covered all our questions. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much.
Right. At this stage, I move that we have a break for 10 minutes. So if we come back at 3:50. Seconded Deputy Mayor Lucas. All those in favour say aye. Resume our seats. We have Ms. Karen Anderson coming up on Zoom, and we're just getting her camera operational. And once we've got that, we'll resume.
Excuse me, Your Worship. Can His Worship hear me?
Yes, he can. Yes. He's turned his mic. The whole room can hear you.
I'm going to suggest that there does appear to be some software glitch somewhere, that unless councillors have a particular desire to see my face, I am willing to go ahead. I recognise listening to a completely disembodied voice is a little unnatural, but I'm conscious that you are considerably behind time as well.
Yes. Look, that'd be wonderful. Thank you. And so let's proceed on that basis.
For sure. So the admin staff that were busily trying to get the video up and running, I appreciate that time. If you manage to do it partway through, that's cool. If not, maybe we could have some discussions after the round of hearings is finished and see if we can get that set in place for the future. All right, sir, and councillors, you can see my screen, or I can see that you can see my screen. So there's 4 parts. Firstly, I apologise. I continue to be quite unwell, which impacts the ability to prepare and to present. One consequence is para 1.21 states section 6. It was a typo. If you could please correct it to section 9. Para 5.1 was missing some words. If you could possibly make those insertions to properly convey the purpose is to require necessary oversight. Now, I just want to identify that my rewrite was to try to deal with information requested before the consultation, because yet again, Council failed to provide it as soon as reasonably practicable, and instead delayed until as close as 1.5 days before the consultation closed, despite being asked for urgency. Now, the reasons why may be self-evident from my submission. I make no apology for the length, because it still does not capture all the irregularities this triennium. I'm also conscious that you will be told I am wrong. And I remind you, Council has never successfully defended a single complaint investigated by an external agency lodged by me. To the extent you now lead New Zealand for false advertising breaches, Lagoima breaches per capita, and the most extensive and intensive investigation ever initiated by the Ombudsman in the history of New Zealand. You've also just recently been positioned as the only councillors' names to have ever been associated with undeniable proof of an appetite for and tolerance of abusing animals. Because of dog issues about which you are confidently informed, I am always wrong. But turning back to the issue underpinning the AP is a request you authorise charging dog owners more, despite an inability to explain how money has or will be expended. Those snaps from my submission. No plausible reasons given for needing more money in the context of many irregularities that include spending over 7% of the budget on activities outside the scope of the DCA, littered with unaccountable, with spending around those that isn't accounted for, so plainly far more. And that was what I could find from limited information. I want to deal with tags. You simply cannot try to recoup a secretly created deficit by illegally overcharging future dog owners for more than 24 years. 24 years, especially for tags so unfit for purpose they last less than one. Council cannot bind future councils. You know that. And the DCA certainly doesn't provide the power to use unfit for purpose dog tags to do so. On poo bags, the environmental claims were removed from the website after my submission was received, my first submission. More thousands expended making more false statements, in this case also hiding many irregularities that included direct personal interest at the same time. And I implore you to be deeply concerned about this. At the same time, reducing DCO numbers to increase payment to staff with no field role, no field capability, while not resourcing even the remaining DCOs to perform basic dog control functions properly. I urge you to be concerned about the under-resourcing of DCOs because we depend upon them to perform work that in many cases none of us would wish to perform. They deserve the resourcing to do better than that. Now, the nomenclature used around this is immaterial. The dog abuse video provided undeniable and completely indefensible evidence of extreme dysfunction. And no information has justified the financial management, let alone the proposed increases, which means you have been neatly positioned, not by me, between two choices. You authorise continued unaccounted for profligate spending on dog control that no longer even pretends to perform proper dog control functions properly. Or you exercise your governance powers and you get dog control under control. Now, this is really a second but final opportunity because the decision that you make will determine what you stand for. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, are there any questions? There appear to be none. So thank you very much, Ms. Anderson, for your submission. Do you wish to move straight on to your Aurora submission?
I think that's, yes, as per my slide, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll similarly.
I can just go straight ahead, sir.
Yes.
It's very short.
Away you go. Thank you.
Okay. Nothing in the provided information convincingly justified the sale of Aurora, beyond paying for past spending and funding more. Now, in dog revenue, I found over 100,000 of profligate spending in 1.7 million, in a budget of about 1.7 million, and multiple instances of spending money that nobody can account for, so you don't know how much it was. That is not convincing evidence. Spending has been reined in, so that the only prudent option is to sell a major asset. Now, many submitters have given you many reasons not to do so. The arguments range from the heartfelt to very elegant articulations of many technical and legal reasons and issues. I am not going to reproduce them, but I endorse them. So I just wanted to take this couple of minutes to suggest you think wisely before adding Aurora to associations with animal abuse, because alliteration is not the measure of sound decision making.
Thank you. That is the That is the end of your submission, is that right?
Yes, as unbelievable as it is that I didn't perfectly end on the 5-minute mark, that's all I wish to say, sir. I'm just simply emphasising that I see no purpose in repeating what you have already heard, but I very clearly want to make it clear to you that I am another vote endorsing it, which is, of course, not to sell Aurora.
Thank you. That's very considerate. Councillor Vandevers.
Thank you for your submission. Not much detail on your reasons for not wanting to sell Aurora other than that they've been covered by others. Is it your view that the $1 billion that we have of public money invested in Aurora should not give us a financial return but should be kept as a public good?
I appreciate the care in that question. Sorry, Your Worship, through the chair. I appreciate the care in the councillor's question, but I feel that it's double-pronged. I can expect both because to answer yes or no means I'm automatically committed to two things that I don't necessarily agree with. I believe it should be providing a return. Through the chair, Councillor Vandevers, I believe that it should be kept as a public good. I believe both of those things. Where I disagree with those who support a sale is that one justification is that it hasn't been returning or performing well to date. Therefore, sell it to those who can. I say no. I say sort out your management. Get it performing well, and then it will return us a benefit, and then we also retain a public good or an asset. Does that, through the chair, does that answer the councillor's question?
I think so, but he has another one.
It does, and thank you for that. The background is that we have had many years of trying to sort out the management, and being at an arm's length and being a council company, that hasn't worked too well. But my other real question is, given that for Aurora to be successful and to be able to optimise its operation, especially with the massive injections of capital required for the Central Otago area, do you agree that Aurora needs to invest far more money in extending its infrastructure into Central Otago? And are you aware that the DCC simply cannot raise that degree of finance?
Through the chair again, I think there are two separate issues there, so a yes/no answer is not easily provided. The difficulty, and I appreciate that the councillor is wanting extremely detailed responses on details, and I applaud the councillor for doing that. I will note I wish there was just as much concern about dogs. Look after the pennies and the pounds, look after themselves. But returning to Aurora, I'm just trying to identify, and I didn't take notes from the question. Expansion into Otago, there's two issues. Can you raise the debt? I'm not adequately familiar with the financial situation to be able to answer or address that in technical detail, but I do believe from the reports that others with both far more expertise in local government funding than me, and who are particularly interested in those details, have done so and have provided both a response to that and also perhaps some viable alternatives. Secondly, expansion into Otago, that's part of Central Otago. That's part of managing. I do think that you are positioned to actually to reflect carefully on the way in which Aurora manages its responsibilities. Part of our problem is that we tend to think from a public interest, a solely public interest perspective. So there's no council that would willingly cut off electricity supply to Central Otago people, or at least I hope not. But I think that is also something that wasn't fully and properly explicated in the information made available to the public as part of this consultation. And so I'm very, very loath to potentially mislead the councillor in terms of my position because it is unformed. And through the chair, I do apologise to the councillor for being unable to give him a definitive response on either of those. The questions deserve them, but I hope he accepts my reasoning for being unwilling to do so.
I do, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Anderson. Thank you for your submission and joining with us today.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, now. Very good.
Right, okay. Thanks very much. Hello there.
Hello.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give a bit of, sorry, I just ran up the stairs, a bit of support to my submission about Signal Hill and sorry, you're waving. So. All right, okay. All right, okay.
And the councillor has a question ready for you once you've made your submission. Away
okay, yeah. So as everyone is hopefully aware, the top of Signal Hill, it's where we go on, well, it's where everyone goes if they want to have a view of the city, and it's in many promotional photos of the city, and it's where you might take someone to see over Dunedin. And I go on my tours to show particularly cruise ship passengers Dunedin. And basically the issue I have is the vegetation is slowly growing up to crowd out the view of the city, so there's actually less and less of the city you can see up there. Many of those trees are just like pine trees and eucalyptus trees that are fast growing and non-native trees. And it's actually kind of a mess. It's just like an area that's been just left to grow wild, so to speak. And it could be sort of replanted in low-growing native trees to give a much better view of the city for people, as opposed to just sort of wilding pines and eucalyptus. And I think me and other operators would even be happy to try and cut down some of those trees so that our visitors could get a better view of the city. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say about that.
Oh, that's great, thank you. And there are several questions for you, so it's also good, starting with Councillor Barker.
Just asking, are you aware that yesterday the consultation on the future of Signal Hill Reserve went out to the public?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, I wasn't aware of that happening yesterday, sorry.
Do you, are you on the Tourism Kōrero Facebook page?
Yes, I'm on that Facebook page, but I may not have checked Facebook yesterday.
Oh, I haven't put it on yet. Cause I was just wondering how do you get your information from council about what submissions are going on at the moment? Because I think there are a number that affect the tourism industry.
I don't have a specific source. I just generally pick things up from the ODT and just what people are talking about, and yes, Facebook would be a way I get some information as well, yes.
The reason that I'm asking is to ascertain how we can get better information to you about this process. So do you think it would be a good idea if we had a better communication with the tourism industry?
Yes, I think it would be good if the council had a better or specific method of communication with the tourism industry. I think that Port Otago is very effective in getting information out to the tourism industry because so many operators sign on to their system, and there's not a similar system for signing on to for the DCC. But I believe the eyesight would have all and Enterprise Dunedin would have all the tourism operators' information to be able to send out information that way.
Will you be happy if I get this sent to you via the eyesight about the submission, and that would be helpful for addressing these issues?
Yes, I think it would be good if it could be sent through the eyesight to me and other operators that access Signal Hill, and the eyesight, since they sell the tours that go up to Signal Hill, they know who those operators were.
Thank you. And for your information, the consultation is open for 2 months, so till the 15th of July.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Next question is Councillor O'Malley. So the
sorry.
question, no, there's more questions.
That was exactly Councillor Barker's question. So.
Yeah. So don't go away. Councillor Walker has a question.
Kia ora, Andrew. Thanks for coming in. And I know the area well when I cycle up there. Just wondered why you've used this process rather than just generically contacting council by its 4774,000 number in terms of getting tree removal.
Yes, I was told by another operator that they had already approached the council and that the council wasn't interested in doing anything. It was a low priority for them, and so I thought it might be better to elevate it to a higher level in the council.
I just fully suggest you do go through that process, and if you don't feel you get resolution, to hit one of us up.
Okay, I can go through that process as well.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you, and thank you for your submission. Like most of us, I think I take people up there as well whenever I have visitors to town. And I've spoken to a few operators up there. So I'm wondering what your opinions are, if you have any, of the state of the road or otherwise up to Signal Hill. Is it fit for the amount of traffic it gets?
Okay, so as far as the state of the road is concerned, it's not ideal for the traffic that's now going up there. It's basically like a one-lane road whereby if two buses have to pass each other, one bus has to pull fully over the side of the road, and then it can be often very difficult for two buses to get past. It's not probably suitable for dual axle, even though they do take dual axle up there. I don't, but people like Ritchie's and Go Bus often take 50-seater buses up there, and it's a very small road. So it would be, very useful if the road was upgraded, given, again, as I mentioned, that it is the prime way that people can easily get a view over the city, and it's used in many promotional shots of the city.
Thank you. And Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Mr Rutherford, for coming in. I'm just about to send an email for you, and I'm assuming that you would like to subscribe, so I'm going to organise that link up to the Enterprise Dunedin email regularly so that you can get that information. Are you a member of Dunedin Host?
I've been to a number of Dunedin Host meetings. I'm not sure what my current membership's status is of the organisation.
So the reason I ask that is that they send out updates and information to members, and you might find that useful just going forward.
Yeah, I get the information from Dunedin Host.
Very good. And I think we've exhausted questions. So there we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Now we have our final submitter for the day is Kimberly Collins, and she might be on Zoom or Teams or somewhere. Is she there? Very good. So she,
I have to sit back from this.
oh yes.
There's nobody else after this?
There's nobody else after this, so please be excused. And Councillor Mayhem's away. Come back.
I was checking the still court.
Yes, still a quorum. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right. So we're just looking to see if we can get a picture up.
Can you hear me at all?
Yes. Yes. Nice and clearly.
Fabulous. Shall I get started?
Yes, we're all ready for you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to present. I'm Kimberly Collins. I'm the project manager for Predator Free Dunedin. It has been 5 years, believe it or not, since we launched, and our community continues to make really, really good progress. We have removed 63,000 possums, 34,000 rats, and 1,900 mustelids like stoats and ferrets and weasels since we started. People are also reporting more bird life and other native species. We're getting reports of fruit trees and gardens being saved from possums. The Botanic Garden has even had one of its biggest rhododendron blooms in recent history. So being a predator-free city really does have its economic benefits. The return on investment is significant in our eyes. Council contributions are matched, first of all, by co-funding from central government, private businesses and other councils, but it's also another way to enhance Dunedin's reputation as the wildlife capital and to create quality tourism opportunities. We feel this is reflected in the Destination Dunedin plan, which did prioritise world-leading environmental practices and showcases the partnership with Predator Free Dunedin to connect visitors with nature. We feel that businesses can also benefit from being a predator-free city. Biosecurity is a big issue and a big cost for our industries and our businesses. We know from Predator Free Wellington that removing rats from Miramar has meant that the airport, local eateries and food services, factories, offices and even households now have zero expenses associated with pest control. The ambitious predator-free goal also means reduced costs for council over time. So eliminating possums, rats and mustelids now means less spent in the future to suppress their numbers in parks and reserves across Dunedin. They'll be gone, and that funding usually tagged to controlling them can be directed elsewhere to remove other predator species, target weeds, plant trees. I'm sure the community has a pretty long list. So as we see the benefits of becoming a predator-free city and the progress that we've made across Dunedin, our plans for the future are at risk. We know that funding from central government, including our key supporters, Predator Free 2050 Limited, isn't guaranteed. our highest chance of retaining that funding is to demonstrate success. So we're on track to eliminate possums from the Otago Peninsula by September, and we're currently going hard on mop-up operations using every tool in the toolbox, thermal drones, scat detection dogs, even helicopters. But we feel we also need to demonstrate success in other ways. We need to show strong partnerships, particularly with our council. Thankfully, we're already doing that. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Dunedin City Council for its leadership in the predator-free space as a funder, a member organisation, and as a delivery partner. The City Sanctuary team is making an incredible contribution to our city. It has supercharged our urban predator control in backyards and parks and reserves, and aligning itself with the wider goals to eliminate possums across the whole of Dunedin. So their volunteers have contributed 28,000 hours this year alone, which represents $1.5 million of on-the-ground operations that might otherwise be done by paid contractors and can now be spent in other parts of the city. So it's allowing council to do more by using those volunteers to do track lines and to control predators in their backyards. It's always a pleasure for this very reason to update you on how well City Sanctuary is doing, but I will take this opportunity to sow a seed for next year's long-term plan process. So council currently employs 2 permanent roles to deliver the City Sanctuary program. These roles have become an integral part of council's operations, and their role has actually expanded to include the management of parks pest control contracts. 5 years ago, Predator Free Dunedin agreed to fund these positions with the understanding that these would be covered by council beyond 24-25. This is really good for both Predator Free and council, as our work hits a lot of your strategic goals. So to be specific, 2 out of 5 goals in the wellbeing strategy, all 4 goals in the park strategy, and all 3 goals in the Te Aotearoa strategy. So I'm really excited about bringing a case to council next year for this as part of the long-term plan process. And in the meantime, I would really just encourage you all to take notice of the predator-free work happening across our city and to really think about how you can see Dunedin becoming even more of a leader on the national stage in this very exciting and innovative space. Thank you. I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Gary has a question.
First question, Kimberly, is can you expand on the benefit of predator-free Dunedin to businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a really infamous example that you may have seen in the news recently, which would be the Countdown rat situation. We know that they had to close the shop for several weeks, and that would cost their business hundreds of thousands of dollars. This morning, in fact, I actually heard on the news that more than 1 million trays of kiwi fruit exported had to be destroyed because mice were found in the product. So, I mean, there's many examples and ways in which predator-free cities are better for business. I think those are a couple of examples that are a bit tangible, particularly for recent history.
That's excellent. My second question, and I know the success, I've watched the success. Congratulations around the September goal. It's in our sights. What will Predator Free do to ensure that all of that work done over many years by the Otago Peninsula Biodiversity Group and the funding, which will presumably change at that point, how will it be ensured that that work does not go to waste? And the line is how, really?
Yeah, well, we're working through a process to ensure that we do protect that progress. We've got a really clear strategy and plan for once the possums have been removed from the peninsula, a proof of absence model and a huge network of defence. Thankfully, that defence network is already in existence because it is the traps that are currently being used to remove the possums in the first place. We're also using a lot of new technologies like cameras, people reporting possum sightings will be really invaluable. We're pretty confident that we can operate sort of a best practice approach to that in a way that's going to maximise the funding that we put into our efforts.
Just briefly, the technology is quite expensive, because, you know, the dogs are really tremendous. I had a trap delivered to my door today that's, I believe, is $500 worth, which shocked me. It's an automatic reset. Would that be pretty typical of the new technology?
Yeah, I think it really varies on the tool in question. So I'm assuming you might be talking about an AT220 trap, which is
what we have been. Very pesky possum.
Yes, we've been using these traps across the landscape. I believe Dunedin is actually one of the biggest networks in the country, and these are fabulous because, okay, they're $500, but they self-reset for a period of 6 months, which means that you don't have the cost of sending someone out to check the trap every time it captures a possum. And it means that we can actually leave it in the landscape for, to just basically do its thing. So yeah, there's often a cost, but we feel very strongly that the investment now in this predator-free movement is going to really pay dividends, and that the return on investment is quite significant for council, but also for Dunedin's residents.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Thank you. Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you. If a resident has an issue with rodents or possums or any sort of creature, can they ring predator free and get them to come around, or do they need to go to commercial operators? How does that work, that relationship?
It is specific to where in Dunedin they're based. So we are operating under a sort of strategic approach. We are currently focusing on possums on the Otago Peninsula. In the city area, we are focused on areas that border the peninsula, but also the West Harbour Mount Cargill area. So the West Harbour Mount Cargill piece is really important too. We're trying to remove possums from there. In short, I would recommend that residents go to the website, and we've got some pretty clear guidelines as to how they can engage with our project specifically. We can also direct them to the iSite in the Octagon, where Dunedin City Council again has supported our vision by making traps available for purchase for residents who are outside of our core strategic operating areas.
Have you heard that commercial operators are finding it difficult to get people to do the actual job of getting rid of predators? Is there a shortage? Is that something you've heard?
No, that's not something that I've come across.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And that appears to have covered our questions. So thank you very much, Ms. Collins. Thank you for presenting to us and waiting patiently. And that is the end of the meeting. So I move that we end the meeting at 4:30. Seconded Deputy Mayor Lucas. All those in favour say aye. Carried.